Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Imagine spending years building something incredible while they mock your efforts, only to watch their faces when they realize you're actually their boss. That's exactly what happened to me. I'm Emily Chen, 32 years old, and this is the story of how my brother's constant mockery of my failed business backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Growing up, my brother Marcus was always the golden child. 3 years older than me, he followed our father's footsteps into corporate finance, climbing the ladder at prestigious firms while I chose a different path. From childhood, the contrast between us was stark. He was all pressed suits and perfect grades, while I was the dreamer who spent weekends at startup meetups and coding workshops. "Emily, when are you going to get a real job?" became my mother's favorite question at family gatherings. My father would just shake his head disapprovingly, while Marcus would smirk from behind his expensive coffee cup. I started my tech company, Innovate Tech Solutions, right after college, while Marcus was celebrating his promotion to junior executive at Stewart Brooks Financial. I was working out of my tiny apartment, living on ramen noodles and determination. My initial focus was on developing AI-driven software for small businesses, not exactly glamorous, but I saw potential where others saw nothing. "Still playing entrepreneur?" Marcus would ask at every family dinner. "You know, there's an entry-level position at my firm if you want to actually make something of yourself." I'd smile and change the subject. What they didn't know was that while they were pitying my struggling business, I was quietly revolutionizing business automation software. My company's first product, AutoFlow, was gaining traction in the startup community. We weren't making headlines, but we were making progress. Then came the weekly family dinner that changed everything. It was a tradition our parents insisted on maintaining, even though it usually devolved into a showcase of Marcus's achievements and a dissection of my perceived failures. That particular Sunday, Marcus was especially smug. He'd just been promoted to senior vice president at Stewart Brooks, and everyone was celebrating his success. To Marcus, our father raised his glass, following in my footsteps and making us proud. Marcus soaked in the praise, then turned to me with that familiar condescending smile. "So, little sister, still running your little computer business?" I took a sip of wine, already knowing where this was going. "You know," he continued, "it's not too late to join the real business world. Stewart Brooks is expanding, and with my recommendation." "I'm doing fine, Marcus," I interrupted, but he wasn't listening. "Still playing entrepreneur?" He laughed, loud enough to make our mother wince. "Come on, Emily, it's been what, 5 years? Time to grow up and join the adults." That's when the doorbell rang. Our mother looked confused. We never had unexpected guests at family dinner. She went to answer the door, and I heard murmured conversation before she returned to the dining room, followed by a tall, distinguished-looking man in an impeccable suit. Marcus's face lit up with recognition. "Mr. Harrison, what an unexpected pleasure." He stood quickly, nearly knocking over his wine glass. "Everyone, this is James Harrison, the new CEO of Stewart Brooks." Mr. Harrison smiled politely at Marcus, then his eyes found me. His entire demeanor changed as he bowed slightly. "Ma'am, your acquisition papers are ready for final review," he said formally. "I apologize for interrupting your family dinner, but given the magnitude of the deal..." My brother choked on his drink. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked between me and his CEO, his face growing increasingly pale. Our parents sat frozen, forks halfway to their mouths. You see, what my family didn't know was that Innovate Tech had grown beyond their wildest imaginations. While they were dismissing my little computer business, I had built it into a tech powerhouse. Our AI solutions were now handling data processing for some of the biggest companies in the world. And yes, we were in the process of acquiring Stewart Brooks Financial. I don't understand," Marcus stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Mr. Harrison looked confused. "Ms. Chen's company, Innovate Tech Solutions, is completing the acquisition of Stewart Brooks. Surely you were aware." He trailed off, noting the shocked expressions around the table. I stood up, smoothing my casual dinner outfit. "Perhaps we should discuss this in private, Mr. Harrison." "Of course, ma'am. The board is quite excited about the direction you've proposed for the company." Marcus collapsed back into his chair, his face ashen. Our father's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, while our mother gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. "Emily," Marcus finally managed, "what's going on?" I smiled, the same kind of smile he'd given me countless times when mocking my choices. "Oh, just playing entrepreneur, big brother." The story of how I reached this point is one of determination, strategic thinking, and yes, a bit of sweet revenge, but let me take you back to where it really began. 5 years earlier, while Marcus was climbing the corporate ladder, I was noticing a crucial gap in the market. Big financial institutions were struggling to adapt to the digital age, stuck with outdated systems that couldn't keep up with modern banking needs. While they were patching old software, I was building something revolutionary. AutoFlow, my company's first product, was just the beginning. What started as a simple business automation tool evolved into an AI-powered financial analysis system that could process and analyze data faster and more accurately than any existing solution. We called it FinAI. The early days were tough. I worked 18-hour days, often sleeping on the office couch. My small team of developers shared my vision, and more importantly, my determination to succeed. We lived on coffee and takeout, debugging code late into the night while Marcus was attending luxury corporate retreats. "Your brother just got another promotion," my mother would tell me during our weekly calls. "He's got a corner office now. Are you eating properly? That apartment of yours is so small." What she didn't know was that I had already moved out of that small apartment, not to a bigger one, but into my office. Every penny we made went back into the company. While Marcus was buying his first luxury car, I was reinvesting in better servers and hiring top talent. The first major breakthrough came when a mid-sized bank adopted FinAI for their data processing. Within months, their efficiency increased by 300%. Word spread quickly in the financial sector. Suddenly, we weren't just another tech startup. We were the company that was revolutionizing banking software. But I kept our success quiet. No flashy press releases, no social media announcements. We operated in stealth mode, letting our results speak for themselves. While Marcus bragged about his promotions at family dinners, I listened and observed, learning about the inefficiencies at Stuart Brooks through his boasting. "You should see our new system," he'd say proudly, "cost the company millions to implement." I'd nod politely, knowing that their expensive new system was already obsolete compared to what we were developing. The acquisition plan wasn't initially part of my strategy, but as Innovate Tech grew, we started getting attention from major players in the finance industry. When I learned that Stuart Brooks was struggling to compete in the digital age, I saw an opportunity. It took months of careful planning. While Marcus was celebrating his promotion to senior vice president, I was in confidential meetings with Stuart Brooks' board of directors. They were impressed by FinAI's capabilities and concerned about their own company's future in an increasingly digital market. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Every time Marcus belittled my little computer business, I was one step closer to acquiring his company. Back at that family dinner, after Mr. Harrison's unexpected appearance, the dynamics shifted dramatically. Marcus sat in shocked silence as I reviewed the acquisition papers with his CEO. "These terms look acceptable," I said, scanning the documents. "We'll proceed with the board meeting tomorrow as planned." "Emily," our father finally found his voice, "how is this possible?" I looked up from the papers. "Remember when you both told me I was wasting my time with technology? While you were focused on traditional finance, the world was changing. Innovate Tech currently provides AI solutions to 8 of the top 10 banks in the country. Stuart Brooks is actually a bit behind the curve." Marcus flinched at that last part. But you never said anything," our mother whispered. "Would you have listened?" I asked quietly. "Every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject to Marcus's latest promotion." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat politely. "If I may, Mrs. Chen, your daughter's company is currently valued at just over $4 billion. She's been quite modest about her achievements." The sound of my father's fork clattering onto his plate echoed in the sudden silence. $4 billion? Marcus wheezed. "Give or take." I shrugged. The market's been quite favorable to tech stocks lately. The next few weeks were interesting, to say the least. The acquisition made headlines in the financial press. Tech innovator acquires traditional banking giant. Marcus's colleagues quickly learned that his little sister was their new boss, and the office dynamics shifted dramatically. I kept Marcus in his position. I'm not vindictive by nature, but I did insist that he report directly to me for the digital transformation project. Our first meeting was memorable. He sat across from me in the conference room, tugging uncomfortably at his collar. The same brother who had mockingly offered me an entry-level position was now presenting his department's quarterly results to me. "As you can see," he stammered, clicking through his PowerPoint, "our traditional methods have been quite effective." "Traditional methods aren't enough anymore," I interrupted. "That's why Stuart Brooks is now part of Innovate Tech. We'll be implementing FinAI across all departments starting next month. But our clients prefer the personal touch, he protested weakly. Our AI enhances the personal touch, it doesn't replace it, I explained. Something you might have known if you'd ever actually asked about my little computer business. That hit home. Marcus slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him. I really messed up, didn't I? In more ways than one, I agreed, but now you have a chance to learn and adapt. The question is, are you willing to? The transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal too. Our family dynamics underwent a seismic shift. Sunday dinners became very different affairs. Emily, tell us more about this AI technology, our father would now ask eagerly, while our mother beamed proudly. Marcus, to his credit, started making an effort to understand the technology side of the business. He even enrolled in some coding courses. I should have paid attention when you were trying to tell me about this years ago, he admitted one day. The acquisition process wasn't without its challenges. Merging a traditional financial institution with a tech company meant dealing with different corporate cultures, resistant employees, and technical integration issues, but these were exactly the kind of challenges I'd built my career on solving. We implemented changes gradually, using FinAI to streamline operations while maintaining the human elements that made Stewart Brooks successful. The results spoke for themselves. Within 6 months, efficiency was up 400%, and client satisfaction had never been higher. 1 year after the acquisition, I called a family meeting, not a dinner, but a proper meeting in my office. Marcus arrived first, looking much different from the arrogant executive he'd been. Success had humbled him, and learning had renewed him. Our parents arrived next, finally seeing my workplace for the first time. Their eyes widened as they took in the sleek headquarters of Innovate Tech, now one of the most valuable tech companies in the country. I wanted to show you something, I said, leading them to a wall of photographs. It displayed the history of Innovate Tech, from our first tiny office to our current success. Every step of the way, even when you thought I was failing, I was building something meaningful. My mother wiped away tears. We should have believed in you. I believe in her now, Marcus said quietly. She's taught me more about business in the past year than I learned in my entire career. My father, ever the pragmatist, finally asked the question that had probably been bothering him for months. Why didn't you tell us sooner about your success? I considered the question carefully before answering, because I needed to do this on my own terms, not to prove you wrong, but to prove myself right. Success isn't always about corner offices and fancy titles. Sometimes it's about seeing a problem and having the courage to solve it, even when no one else believes in your solution. The meeting ended with something unexpected, an apology from Marcus, not just a simple "I'm sorry," but a genuine acknowledgement of his past behavior. I was threatened by your success, he admitted. Every time you talked about your business, I dismissed it because I was afraid you might actually succeed where I was just following a predetermined path. You weren't just playing entrepreneur, you were revolutionizing an entire industry while I was just climbing a corporate ladder. That admission marked a new chapter in our relationship. Marcus became one of my strongest advocates within Stewart Brooks, helping bridge the gap between the old and new ways of doing business. His experience with traditional finance combined with his newly acquired tech knowledge made him invaluable during the transition. Our parents, too, underwent their own transformation. My mother stopped asking when I would get a real job and started asking about AI technology instead. My father, who had once dismissed my business plans, now proudly tells anyone who will listen about his daughter's tech company. The story made its way through the business world. Of course, sister acquires brother's company made for interesting headlines, but the real story wasn't about sibling rivalry or revenge. It was about the transformation of an industry, about seeing possibilities where others saw only tradition, and about the courage to pursue your vision even when those closest to you don't understand it. 2 years after the acquisition, at another family dinner, we still maintained the tradition. Marcus raised his glass for a toast, but this time, it was different. To my little sister, he said, his voice thick with emotion, who taught me that success doesn't always wear a suit and tie, and that sometimes the best business lessons come from those we underestimate the most. I looked around the table, at my proud parents, my humbled brother, and the empire we'd built together, and realized that success tastes sweetest when shared with those who once doubted you. The company continues to grow, innovating and expanding into new areas. Marcus now heads our traditional banking integration division, combining his experience with our new technologies. Our parents have become unexpected tech enthusiasts, always eager to learn about our latest developments. As for me, I'm still the same person who started coding in a tiny apartment, just with a slightly larger office and a lot more responsibility. The lessons I learned along the way, about persistence, about believing in yourself when others don't, about the importance of disrupting traditional thinking, these are now part of Innovate Tech's core values. And whenever I interview new employees, I always ask them one question: what would you do if no one believed in your ideas? Because sometimes, the most powerful motivator is having something to prove, not to others, but to yourself. The next time someone tells you you're just playing at your dreams, remember my story. Sometimes, those who mock your journey end up working for you. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's massive, undeniable success. Just ask my brother. He's in a meeting right now, presenting his latest report to me.
The shattering glass and terrified screams propelled me out of bed and down the stairs, my heart pounding. In the hallway, I froze at the sight before me. Thomas, my son-in-law, gripping a bloodied baseball bat, his face contorted with rage. Rachel, my daughter, lay crumpled on the floor, her sobs echoing off the walls. "What have you done?" I screamed, rushing to Rachel's side. Her face was already swelling, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. Thomas sneered, his eyes wild. "She's my wife. I'll do what I want with her." He raised the bat menacingly. "Stay out of this, Diane." I positioned myself between him and Rachel. "Get out. Now. Before I call the police." My voice shook, but I held his gaze. With a final glare, Thomas stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I knelt beside Rachel, cradling her as she wept. "I'm taking you to the hospital. It's going to be okay, sweetheart." But as I helped her to the car, I couldn't shake the icy dread settling in my stomach. I'd seen the look in Thomas's eyes. This was only the beginning. At the hospital, I paced the waiting room, my mind reeling. How had it come to this? When Rachel first brought Thomas home, he'd seemed like a dream. Charming, attentive, doting on her and Caleb. But as the years passed, that perfect facade cracked, revealing something darker underneath. The controlling behavior, the explosive anger. Rachel always made excuses, convinced she could fix him. Until tonight. Seeing my daughter battered and broken, I knew I had to act. I couldn't lose Rachel like I'd lost my husband. Memories of his casket being lowered into the ground flashed through my mind. No, I refused to bury my child, too. "Mrs. Wilkins?" A doctor emerged, his face grave. "Your daughter has a severe concussion and multiple contusions. She'll need to stay for observation." I nodded numbly, bile rising in my throat. "Can I see her?" He led me to her room where Rachel lay pale and still, a bandage stark white against her hair. Rage burned in my chest, hardening into resolve. I wouldn't let Thomas near her again. No matter what it took. Caleb. The thought hit me like a freight train. He was still at home with the babysitter, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding. I had to get back to him. "I'll be back soon," I whispered to Rachel's unconscious form. "I promise." Driving home, I gripped the steering wheel, a plan taking shape. First, a restraining order. Then security cameras, new locks, a baseball bat of my own if needed. I'd turn the house into a fortress Thomas couldn't breach. But even as I plotted, a small voice whispered that it wouldn't be enough. That Thomas's obsession ran too deep. A shudder ran through me. Pulling into the driveway, I took a deep breath and composed myself. I had to be strong for Caleb. Entering the house, I found him on the couch, his small face pinched with worry. "Grandma, where's Mommy?" I sat beside him, pulling him into a hug. "She had an accident, but she's going to be okay." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. "I need you to be brave, okay, buddy?" He nodded against my chest, but I felt the first of many questions forming, questions I wasn't ready to answer. Holding him tighter, I closed my eyes. "God, give me strength," I prayed. The battle was only beginning. The hospital corridors felt endless as I made my way to Rachel's room, the sterile smell burning my nostrils. I'd left Caleb with my sister, promising I'd be back soon. But the sight of Rachel lying motionless, her face a patchwork of purple bruises, made me wonder how long soon would be. A soft knock made me turn. Officer Davis stood in the doorway, his expression grim. "Mrs. Wilkins, I need to speak with you." In the hallway, he flipped open his notepad. "We've arrested Thomas for domestic battery, but given the severity of Rachel's injuries, he'll likely make bail." My stomach dropped. "What? He nearly killed her." "I understand your frustration. That's why I strongly advise you to file a restraining order." I nodded, a bitter laugh escaping me. as if a piece of paper could stop Thomas's rage. But I'd do whatever it took to keep him away from Rachel and Caleb. The next few days passed in a blur of police stations and courtrooms. The restraining order was granted, but it did little to ease the knot of fear in my chest. Rachel remained in the hospital, drifting in and out of consciousness. It was during one of these visits that I first noticed it, a figure lurking in the parking lot watching me. A chill ran down my spine. Thomas, I marched outside, my hands balled into fists. What the hell are you doing here? You know you can't be within 500 feet of Rachel. Thomas sneered, his eyes bloodshot. She's my wife. You can't keep me from her. Or my son. Caleb isn't your son anymore. Not after what you did. You poisoned them against me, he roared, spit flying from his mouth. You turned my own family against me. I stepped closer, my voice low and fierce. You did that yourself. Now leave before I call the police. With a final glare, he turned and stalked away. But I knew it wasn't over. Thomas's obsession ran too deep. My fears were confirmed when I brought Rachel home. She was a ghost of herself, jumping at every noise, rarely leaving her room. And Caleb? My sweet grandson retreated into himself, his once bright smile dimmed. But it was the small things that made my skin crawl. Caleb's favorite stuffed animal going missing. A kitchen window I swore I'd locked found open. I knew it was Thomas, violating the restraining order, invading our home like a cancer. I installed security cameras, changed the locks, but still, the violations continued. I'd catch glimpses of Thomas watching the house, his eyes hungry. Rachel grew more fearful by the day. I can't do this anymore, Mom, she whispered one night, tears streaming down her face. I'm scared all the time. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I held her as she sobbed, my own eyes burning. We'll get through this, sweetheart. I won't let him hurt you again. But the next day, I found Caleb's backpack on the front lawn, the contents strewn across the grass. A note was tucked inside, scrawled in Thomas's jagged handwriting. I'm coming for my son. You can't stop me. Rage ignited in my veins. Enough was enough. I dialed Officer Davis with shaking fingers. I need you to arrest Thomas. He's violating the restraining order, stalking us. I'm afraid of what he'll do next. I'll send a patrol car right away. I watched from the window as Thomas was handcuffed and shoved into the police car, screaming obscenities. But even as relief washed over me, I knew this was just a temporary reprieve. Thomas was too far gone, consumed by his twisted desires. He'd stop at nothing to get what he wanted, and I'd stop at nothing to protect my family. The days following Thomas's arrest were filled with a tense, uneasy silence. Rachel barely left her room, jumping at every creak of the floorboards. Caleb clung to me, his small face etched with a fear no child should know. I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, cooking meals, helping with homework, but the specter of Thomas loomed over us, a constant threat. It was a week later when I first saw him. I was walking Caleb home from school, my hand gripping his tightly, when I felt the prickle of eyes on my back. Turning, I spotted Thomas across the street, partially obscured by a tree. Our eyes locked, and a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. I hurried Caleb inside, my heart pounding. But the stalking only escalated from there. Thomas seemed to be everywhere, lurking outside the grocery store, parked down the block, watching from the shadows, always just far enough away to avoid violating the restraining order. Rachel grew more paranoid by the day. I can't take this anymore, Mom, she whispered, her hands trembling. I feel like I'm suffocating. I squeezed her shoulder, trying to project a strength I didn't feel. We'll get through this, honey. I won't let him hurt you again. But the next morning, I found Rachel's tires slashed, shards of rubber strewn across the driveway. White-hot rage surged through me. I stormed down the block to where Thomas lounged in his car, looking smug. I know it was you, I hissed, slamming my hands on the hood. Leave us alone, or I swear to God. Thomas leaned out the window, his face twisted with contempt. Or what, Diane? You'll sick the cops on me again? We both know how well that worked out. You're sick, Thomas. You need help. The only thing I need is my family, my son. His eyes glittered with a manic fervor, and I'll get him back no matter what it takes. I recoiled, my stomach churning. Caleb isn't yours. Not anymore. Thomas's smile turned cold. We'll see about that. I walked away on shaking legs, his laughter echoing behind me. This had to end. But how? The police were useless, the restraining order just a flimsy piece of paper. I felt like I was drowning, helpless against the tide of Thomas's obsession. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Rachel's sobs drifted from down the hall, each one like a knife to my heart. I couldn't take this anymore. I couldn't watch my daughter live in fear, my grandson's innocence shattered. In the darkness, a plan began to take shape. A desperate, dangerous plan. The next morning, I installed new deadbolts on all the doors. Cameras at every angle of the house. A security system with an alarm that would wake the dead. If Thomas wanted to get inside, he'd have to go through Fort Knox. But even as I fortified our defenses, I knew it was only a matter of time before Thomas escalated. He was unraveling, his obsession consuming him like a cancer. I had to be ready. I started sleeping with a baseball bat beside my bed, took self-defense classes at the local gym, anything to feel less helpless, less afraid. But the fear never left, a constant hum beneath my skin. I saw Thomas in every shadow, every creak of the house settling. I jumped at car alarms, my heart racing at the sight of any tall, dark-haired man. I was losing myself, piece by piece, but I couldn't let Rachel and Caleb see. I had to be strong for them, had to hold our crumbling world together with sheer force of will. Late one night, I found Rachel in the kitchen, staring blankly at a cup of tea. "I can't do this, Mom," she whispered. "I can't live like this anymore." I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as she shook. "We'll find a way, honey, I promise." But as I held my broken daughter, I wasn't sure I believed my own words. Thomas's obsession was a monster, devouring us all, and I was terrified it would consume us whole. The security cameras blinked red in the darkness, a silent sentry against the night. But even their watchful gaze couldn't ease the dread coiled in my stomach. Every shadow seemed to hold Thomas's leering face, every creak of the floorboards his footsteps. I was in the kitchen brewing a pot of coffee when Rachel stumbled in, her eyes haunted. "Mom, have you seen Caleb's teddy bear? The one Dad gave him before he died?" I frowned, a chill running down my spine. "No, honey. Isn't it in his room?" "I've looked everywhere. It's just gone." A sickening realization dawned. Thomas, he'd been in the house. Bile rose in my throat as I raced upstairs, tearing through Caleb's room. Drawers hung open, toys scattered, but the bear was nowhere to be found. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice shaking with rage. Officer Davis arrived within minutes, his face grim as he surveyed the scene. "I'll file a report, but without proof it was Thomas." "Who else would take Caleb's bear?" I snapped. "He's escalating. You have to do something." Davis sighed, running a hand over his face. "I'll see what I can do. In the meantime, keep your doors locked. If you see Thomas, call us immediately." But locking the doors felt like putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. Thomas was a virus, infecting every aspect of our lives. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I jumped at every noise, my heart slamming against my ribs, and then the emails started. They poured into Rachel's inbox, each one more disturbing than the last. "I miss you, baby. I miss our family. I just want to be with you and Caleb again. You can't keep me from my son. He needs his father. I'll do whatever it takes to get him back." "This is all your fault, Rachel. You and your mother. You turned Caleb against me. But I'll make you pay. I'll make you all pay." Rachel dissolved into tears as she read them, her shoulders shaking. I held her, my own eyes burning with helpless fury. "That's it," I said, my voice like steel. "I'm ending this, now." I stormed to the police station, the emails clutched in my fist. I slammed them down on Officer Davis's desk, my hands trembling. "Arrest him, now. These are clear violations of the restraining order." Davis scanned the emails, his face darkening. "You're right, Mrs. Wilkins. This is grounds for arrest." I watched, a grim satisfaction burning in my chest as Thomas was led out of his house in handcuffs, spitting and cursing. But even as the police car drove away, I knew this was only a temporary reprieve. Thomas was too far gone, his obsession a cancer that had consumed him whole. Prison wouldn't stop him. Nothing would. I returned home to find Rachel curled on the couch, her face pale and drawn. Caleb sat beside her, clutching a framed photo of his father. My heart cracked at the sight. "Is it over?" Rachel whispered. "Is he gone?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to promise her that the nightmare was finally ending. But I couldn't lie. Not anymore. "For now," I said softly. "But we have to be prepared. Thomas, he's not going to stop. Not until he gets what he wants." Rachel closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "What are we going to do, Mom?" I knelt before her, taking her hands in mine. "We're gonna fight, honey. We're gonna do whatever it takes to keep our family safe." But even as I spoke the words, I felt a flicker of doubt. Thomas's obsession was a wildfire, consuming everything in its path, and I was terrified we were about to be burned alive. The days after Thomas's arrest were a blur of police statements and hushed phone calls with lawyers. Rachel moved through the house like a ghost, jumping at every creak, every shadow. Caleb clung to me, his small face pinched with a fear no child should know. I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, cooking meals, reading bedtime stories, but the specter of Thomas loomed over us, a constant, suffocating presence. It was a week later when the first letter arrived. Rachel found it in the mailbox, her name scrawled across the envelope in Thomas's jagged handwriting. Her face paled as she read it, her hands shaking. "What does it say?" I asked, my heart in my throat. He says he loves me, that he forgives me for putting him in jail, that he knows we'll be a family again soon." I snatched the letter from her hands, scanning the rambling, delusional words. Rage ignited in my veins. Even from behind bars, Thomas was tormenting us. The letters kept coming, each one more disturbing than the last. Thomas professed his undying love for Rachel, his obsession with being a real father to Caleb. He blamed me for turning them against him, vowing revenge. I called Officer Davis, my voice shaking with fury. "You have to stop these letters. He's harassing us from jail." Davis sighed heavily. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilkins, but there's not much we can do. He has a right to send mail." I slammed the phone down, hot tears pricking my eyes. The system was failing us. Thomas was winning, even locked away. Rachel grew more withdrawn, spending hours staring blankly at the walls. She flinched when I touched her, lost in some dark memory. It was like watching my vibrant, beautiful daughter fade away before my eyes. Caleb, too, was slipping away. He woke screaming from nightmares, crying for the father he'd lost long before Thomas's arrest. My heart shattered as I held him, whispering hollow reassurances. "I want Daddy," he sobbed into my shoulder. "I want things to go back to how they were." I stroked his hair, blinking back my own tears. "I know, baby." But there was no going back. Thomas had shattered our world like a hammer through glass. All I could do was try to hold the jagged pieces together. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday. Rachel had ventured out to the store, a rare moment of normalcy, but she returned ashen-faced, a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. "Mom," she whispered, her voice raw. "Look." It was a crayon drawing, crude but unmistakable. 3 stick figures, Rachel, Caleb, and Thomas, smiling together under a yellow sun. Scrawled beneath in a child's handwriting, "I miss you, Daddy." Caleb drew it, for Thomas. He gave it to a guard at the jail. I stared at the drawing, horror and fury rising like bile in my throat. Thomas was manipulating Caleb, poisoning him against us, using a child's love to fuel his twisted obsession. "This ends now," I said, my voice like steel. "I won't let him destroy Caleb too." That night, I lay awake, a plan forming in my mind, a desperate, dangerous plan. I would confront Thomas in jail, look him in the eye, and make him see the monster he'd become. Make him leave us alone, once and for all. In the morning, I kissed a sleeping Rachel and Caleb goodbye, my heart heavy. "I love you," I whispered. "I'm gonna fix this. I promise." The drive to the jail was a blur, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I was buzzed through security, led to a small, cold room, and then, there he was, Thomas, smirking at me through the plexiglass. Well, if it isn't the Wicked Witch herself. I leaned forward, my voice low and fierce. "Listen to me, you son of a bitch. I won't let you destroy my family, not anymore." Thomas's eyes glittered with malice. "They're my family, Diane, mine, and I'll never stop fighting for them, not until my last breath." A chill ran down my spine at the unhinged conviction in his voice. I realized with sickening clarity that no threat, no plea, would stop him. He would hunt us until the day he died. Unless I stopped him first. I jolted awake to the sound of shattering glass. For a moment I lay frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. Then a scream pierced the night. Rachel. I leapt from bed, grabbing the baseball bat I now kept beside me. I raced down the hall to Rachel's room, adrenaline surging through my veins. Please, God, let her be okay. I burst through the door to find Rachel cowering in the corner, her face white with terror. And there, standing over her with a jagged shard of glass, was Thomas. "Get away from her," I snarled, raising the bat. Thomas turned, his eyes wild. Diane, so nice of you to join us. His voice was eerily calm, a stark contrast to the madness in his gaze. How did you get out? My voice shook, fear and fury warring in my chest. You think a little jail cell can hold me? I told you, Diane, I'll never stop fighting for my family. Behind him, Rachel let out a choked sob. Thomas whirled, pressing the glass to her throat. A bead of blood welled beneath the jagged edge. One more step and I'll slit her pretty neck. I froze, my heart in my throat. Thomas, please, you're sick. You need help. The only thing I need is my wife and son, and you're going to give them to me. Mommy? Caleb's terrified voice made my blood run cold. He stood in the doorway, his eyes wide and glassy. Thomas's face split into a grotesque smile. Caleb, come to Daddy. Don't you dare, I hissed. But Caleb, innocent, trusting Caleb, took a tentative step forward. In a flash, Thomas grabbed him, yanking him close. Caleb yelped in fear, tears streaming down his face. There, buddy. Daddy's got you. Thomas's voice was a mockery of comfort, his grip on Caleb bruising. Let him go, Thomas. He's just a child. He's my child, Thomas roared. You took him from me, turned him against me, but that ends now. He began to back towards the door, dragging Caleb with him. Rachel let out a wail, lunging forward, but Thomas kicked her savagely, sending her crumpling. We're leaving, and if either of you try to stop me, I'll kill him. I swear I will. The world narrowed to a single point, my grandson's terrified face. I couldn't let Thomas take him. Couldn't let that monster destroy the last shred of innocence in Caleb's life. I met Thomas's crazed eyes, my grip tightening on the bat. You're not taking him anywhere. With a roar, I swung. The bat connected with Thomas's skull with a sickening crack. He staggered, his grip on Caleb loosening. I swung again, blind with rage. Thomas crumpled to the ground, blood pooling beneath his head. Caleb scrambled free, running to Rachel's arms. For a long moment, the only sound was their muffled sobs. I stood over Thomas's motionless body, the bat slipping from my numb fingers. I'd done it. I'd stopped him, but the victory felt hollow, tainted by the violence that had brought us here. Mom? Rachel's voice was small, broken. I turned to see her cradling Caleb, tears streaking her face. Is he? I knelt beside Thomas, feeling for a pulse. It was there, weak and thready. Part of me, the dark, vengeful part, whispered to finish the job. To end the monster who had shattered our lives. But I couldn't. I wouldn't let Thomas make me a monster too. Call 911, I said, my voice leaden. He's alive. For now. The police came, an ambulance in tow. I watched numbly as they loaded Thomas onto a stretcher, his face a bloody ruin. Officer Davis took my statement, his face grim. You did what you had to, Mrs. Wilkins. You protected your family. But had I? As I held Rachel and Caleb, their tears soaking my shirt, I couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare was far from over. Thomas would live. He would heal. And his obsession, his sickness, that would fester, growing more twisted with each passing day. He would come for us again. I knew it in my bones. And next time I wouldn't hesitate to do what needed to be done. The hospital room was cold, the beeping of machines the only sound. I sat beside Thomas's bed, staring at his battered face. Even in unconsciousness, he looked menacing, his features twisted with hatred. Why, Thomas? I whispered. Why couldn't you just let us go? But I knew the answer. Thomas's obsession was a cancer, consuming him from the inside out. He would never stop. Not until he had what he wanted, or until he was dead. The thought chilled me, but I couldn't shake it. Thomas was a rabid dog, foaming at the mouth, and there was only one way to deal with a rabid dog. I was jolted from my dark musings by a commotion in the hallway. Shouts, the pounding of feet. I leapt up just as Caleb burst into the room, his face streaked with tears. Caleb, what are you doing here? Where's your mom? He has her, Grandma, Caleb sobbed, throwing himself into my arms. The bad man has Mommy. Ice flooded my veins. I whirled to see Thomas's bed empty, the machines shrieking in alarm. He was gone, and he had Rachel. I raced into the hallway, dragging Caleb with me. Help! Someone help! Nurses came running, their faces tight with concern. I babbled out an explanation, my heart slamming against my ribs. They called the police, put the hospital on lockdown. But it was too late. Thomas and Rachel were nowhere to be found. I paced the waiting room, my mind reeling. How could this happen? How could Thomas have escaped, taken Rachel, right under our noses? Officer Davis arrived, his face grim. We're doing everything we can to find them, Mrs. Wilkins. We have roadblocks set up, every available officer searching. He's going to kill her, I whispered, my voice breaking. He's going to kill my baby. Davis gripped my shoulder, his eyes fierce. We won't let that happen, I promise you. But promises meant nothing in the face of Thomas's madness. I knew, with sickening certainty, that he wouldn't stop until Rachel was dead, until we all were, unless I stopped him first. I turned to Davis, my jaw set. I need your help. I need a gun. Davis blinked, taken aback. Mrs. Wilkins, I can't just give you a gun. Then I'll get one myself, but one way or another I'm ending this, tonight. I left Davis sputtering, Caleb in tow. I dropped him at my sister's, ignoring her worried questions. Then I drove to the one place I knew Thomas would take Rachel, the one place that held meaning for him, their old house, the house where he'd shattered her, again and again. I parked down the block, my heart in my throat. The windows were dark, the street silent, but I knew they were in there. I could feel it. I crept around the back, my hand clutching the gun I'd bought off the streets. It felt heavy, alien in my grip, but I pushed down my revulsion. This was the only way. The back door was unlocked. I slipped inside, my breath shallow. The house was dark, the air thick with the stench of fear. A muffled cry made my heart stop. Rachel. I followed the sound, my finger on the trigger. It led me to the bedroom, the door slightly ajar. I peered through the crack, bile rising in my throat. Rachel was tied to the bed, her face battered and streaked with tears. Thomas loomed over her, a gun in his hand. You're mine, Rachel. Forever. And if I can't have you, no one can. He raised the gun, aiming at her head. Rachel let out a wail, straining against her bonds. I burst through the door, my own gun leveled at Thomas. Drop it, now. Thomas whirled, his eyes wild. You just couldn't let us be happy, could you? This isn't happiness, Thomas, this is sickness. Now let her go. Thomas laughed, a sound like shattered glass. Oh, I'll let her go all right, straight to hell. He turned back to Rachel, his finger tightening on the trigger. I fired, the shot deafening in the small room. Thomas staggered, his gun clattering to the floor. He looked down at the blooming red stain on his chest, then back at me, his face slack with shock. You shot me. I kept my gun trained on him, my voice like steel. I warned you, Thomas. I warned you what would happen if you touched my family again. Thomas stumbled forward, his eyes rolling back in his head. He collapsed to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. For a long moment, the only sound was Rachel's muffled sobs. Then sirens split the air, red and blue light strobing through the windows. I untied Rachel with shaking hands, pulling her into my arms. She clung to me, her whole body trembling. It's over, baby. It's finally over. But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. The nightmare Thomas had brought into our lives would never really end. We would carry the scars, visible and invisible, for the rest of our days. But we would carry them together, a family, unbroken. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The hospital room was a stark contrast to the chaos of that night. The beeping machines, the sterile white walls, it was almost peaceful. But the sight of Rachel, bruised and broken in the bed, shattered any illusion of peace. I sat beside her, holding her hand as she slept. The doctor said she would heal, physically at least. But the emotional scars, the trauma Thomas had inflicted, that would take longer, maybe a lifetime. Officer Davis knocked softly on the door, his face somber. Mrs. Wilkins, can I speak with you? In the hallway, he handed me a cup of coffee, his eyes tired. Thomas is in surgery. The doctors say he'll likely pull through. I closed my eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. What happens now? Well, he'll be arrested, charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, a whole host of things. He's looking at serious time. Good. My voice was hard, unyielding. I hope he rots in prison for the rest of his miserable life. Davis nodded, sipping his coffee. There's something else. Your shooting of Thomas, it's been ruled self-defense. You won't face any charges. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Thank you for everything. Davis squeezed my shoulder, a small smile on his face. You did what you had to, Mrs. Wilkins. You saved your daughter's life. But had I? As I watched Rachel sleep, her face pinched with pain, even in dreams, I wondered if I had saved her at all. Or if Thomas had destroyed her long before I pulled that trigger. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. Rachel healed, at least on the outside. She threw herself into therapy, determined to reclaim her life. Caleb, too, slowly emerged from his shell, his laughter echoing through the house once more. but the specter of Thomas still hung over us, a dark cloud that refused to dissipate. His trial loomed, a promise of reliving the nightmare in excruciating detail. The day I took the stand, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the Bible. But as I recounted that night, the terror, the violence, the sheer depravity of Thomas's actions, a strange calm settled over me. I looked him in the eye as I spoke, my voice unwavering. I wanted him to see the full extent of the damage he had wrought, the lives he had shattered in pursuit of his twisted obsession. In the end, the jury deliberated for mere hours, guilty on all counts. Thomas was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. I watched as they led him away, his wrists and ankles shackled. He turned to look at me, his eyes burning with a hatred that took my breath away. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll never stop fighting for my family. Never." A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. "They're not your family, Thomas. Not anymore. You lost that right the moment you raised your hand to Rachel." As the courtroom doors swung shut behind him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. We were free. The years passed, the wounds slowly healing. Rachel met a kind, gentle man, one who showed her the love and respect she deserved. They married in a small, intimate ceremony, Caleb proudly walking her down the aisle. I watched, tears in my eyes as they exchanged vows. My heart swelled with a love so fierce it took my breath away. We had survived. We had triumphed. But even in the happiest of moments, the shadow of Thomas lingered. I knew he still obsessed, still plotted, even from behind prison walls. The letter came on a sunny Tuesday, years after the trial, a parole hearing, the board considering Thomas's release. I read the words with a growing sense of dread, the old fear rising in my throat. I attended the hearing, my heart in my mouth. Thomas sat before the board, his face a mask of contrition. He spoke of rehabilitation, of finding God, of wanting to make amends. But when his eyes met mine, I saw the truth. The same obsession, the same twisted hunger. He had not changed. He would never change. I took the stand, my voice shaking with barely suppressed rage. I spoke of the lives he had destroyed, the terror he had inflicted. I begged, pleaded for the board to see the monster behind the mask. In the end, they did. Parole denied. Thomas would remain behind bars, his obsession left to fester and rot. As I walked out of the hearing, Rachel and Caleb by my side, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had won, truly and finally. Thomas's obsession had consumed him, driven him to madness and despair, but it had not consumed us. We were survivors, a family, unbroken and unbreakable. And that, in the end, was the sweetest revenge of all.
The kitchen timer chimed just as I finished arranging the last of the roasted potatoes around the perfectly cooked prime rib. Everything had to be perfect for tonight. After all, it's not every day you meet the woman who's stolen your only child's heart. My name is Maggie, and after 20 years of being a widow, my son Ethan is all I have. When he called to tell me he was engaged, I felt that familiar mix of joy and loss that comes with watching your child build their own life. But I was determined to welcome his fiancée with open arms. "Mom, you really didn't have to go all out," Ethan said, walking into the kitchen. He looked thinner than I remembered, his usually filled-out frame somehow diminished in his dress shirt. "Nonsense. First impressions matter," I replied, adjusting the centerpiece on my dining room table. "How's Chloe feeling about tonight?" "She's excited." His hesitation made me look up. Maybe we should have mentioned." The doorbell cut him off. Ethan's face went pale, and that should have been my first warning sign. Chloe Bennett was striking in person, tall, willowy, with sharp features and even sharper eyes. She wore a flowing dress made from what looked like sustainable fabric, and her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she hugged me. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Dr. Harlow," she said, her voice carrying a hint of judgment I couldn't quite place. "Please, call me Maggie." I gestured toward the dining room. "I hope you're hungry. I've prepared my specialty." That's when everything went sideways. Chloe stopped dead in her tracks, staring at the spread on the table. Her face transformed from polite interest to absolute horror. "Is that meat?" "Mom's prime rib," Ethan said weakly. "It's her signature dish." "You didn't tell her?" Chloe's voice rose sharply. "Ethan, how could you let your mother prepare a dead animal without warning her that I'm vegan? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I watched my son shrink into himself, something I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. I thought. You thought what? Chloe's eyes narrowed. That I'd compromise my principles? That I'd participate in this carnival of cruelty. I'm so sorry, I started. I had no idea. I can quickly prepare something else. No. Chloe's hand shot up, stopping me mid-sentence. This is exactly what I was afraid of. This complete disregard for ethical choices. Do you have any idea how many sentient beings suffered for this meal? I've been a doctor for 30 years. I've handled emergency room crises, delivered difficult news to patients, and dealt with every kind of personality imaginable. But something about the way this young woman was speaking to me in my own home made my blood boil. Chloe, please, Ethan pleaded. Mom didn't know. And whose fault is that? She turned on him, her voice dripping with disappointment. I thought you were committed to our lifestyle choices. Or was that just another lie? I watched my son's face crumple, and something protective stirred in my chest. Before I could speak, Chloe was already gathering her things. I can't be here. This is violence on a plate. Call me when you're ready to take our relationship seriously, Ethan. She stormed out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Ethan stood there, looking lost. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have told you. Sweetheart, I said softly, is this what you want? He didn't answer immediately, and that silence spoke volumes. Instead, he helped me clear the table, his movements mechanical, avoiding my eyes. As I wrapped up the untouched prime rib later that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this disastrous dinner was just the beginning. My son was changing before my eyes, and not in a good way. The question was, what was I going to do about it? My sister Linda's words from last week echoed in my mind. Sometimes love means watching people make their own mistakes. But as I looked at the family photos on my wall, showing a happier, healthier Ethan, I wondered if there was a limit to that wisdom. 6 months flew by, and suddenly I found myself standing in an eco-friendly wedding venue that smelled strongly of patchouli and hemp. Everything was draped in organic cotton and bamboo fabrics, with potted plants serving as centerpieces. It would have been beautiful if it hadn't felt so aggressively pointed. I adjusted my recycled polyester dress, a requirement from the bride, and watched my son from across the room. Ethan was talking to some of Chloe's friends, his suit hanging looser than when he'd bought it 3 months ago. The shadows under his eyes weren't hidden by his forced smile. Well, this is different, Linda whispered, sidling up next to me with her husband, Frank. I've never seen quinoa served 7 different ways before. At least the champagne's real, Frank muttered, taking a sip. Though I'm pretty sure someone's going to lecture me about the ethics of yeast cultivation any minute now. I should have left, but I couldn't take my eyes off Ethan. He'd always been athletic, solid, like his father. Now his cheekbones were too sharp, his movements slightly sluggish. When did he start looking so? Fragile? Have you tried talking to him? Linda asked, following my gaze. Every time I bring up his health, he gets defensive. Says he's never felt better. I watched as Chloe appeared beside him, her wedding dress made of raw silk and decorated with preserved flowers. She wrapped her arm around his waist, her fingers digging into his side like she was marking her territory. Ladies and gentlemen, the wedding coordinator announced, please take your seats for the reception dinner. The menu cards at our table listed items I could barely pronounce. Frank stared at his plate of mushroom-based fish with the expression of a man facing execution. What exactly am I looking at? He whispered. It's seafood without the sea or the food, Linda replied, poking at something that was supposedly a crab cake, but looked more like wet cardboard. Across the room, Chloe was holding court with her activist friends, gesturing animatedly while Ethan sat quietly beside her. She hadn't touched her food, but she kept glancing at his plate, monitoring each bite he took. Remember when he used to inhale those burgers at our Sunday barbecues? Linda's voice was soft with concern. Before I could respond, Chloe clinked her glass. Everyone, I'd like to make a toast. She stood, commanding attention. Today isn't just about love, it's about transformation. When I met Ethan, he was lost in the fog of societal conditioning, but look at him now. She beamed down at my son. He's embraced a cruelty-free lifestyle, proving that love can open our eyes to truth. The way she said truth made my skin crawl. This wasn't a wedding speech, it was a recruitment pitch. Ethan stood to kiss her, but swayed slightly. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Dr. Kevin Simmons, my colleague who'd come as my plus one, leaned over. "Maggie," he murmured, "how long has he been showing signs of anemia? You noticed too? The pallor, the dizziness. Has he had his B12 levels checked recently?" Before I could answer, there was a commotion at the head table. Ethan had knocked over his water glass, his hands shaking as he tried to clean it up. Chloe's face flashed with something that looked like anger before smoothing into concerned wife mode. "Sweetheart, you're just tired from all the excitement," she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "We should have done more juice cleansing to prepare for today." I gripped my napkin under the table, watching my son apologize repeatedly for something that wasn't his fault. The Ethan I knew would have laughed it off, made a joke. This Ethan looked terrified of disappointing his new wife. "You need to do something," Linda whispered urgently. "I know," I replied, watching Chloe dab at Ethan's shirt with aggressive efficiency. "But if I push too hard, I'll lose him completely." As if sensing my thoughts, Chloe looked up and met my eyes across the room. Her smile was pure ice as she placed a possessive hand on the back of Ethan's neck. The message was clear: he's mine now. I smiled back, letting her see nothing but a proud mother-in-law. But inside, something hardened. This wasn't just about different lifestyle choices anymore. This was about my son's life, and I was done playing nice. After 3 weeks of watching Ethan's Instagram fill with photos of green smoothies and hollow smiles, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat in my office at the hospital, staring at my phone, knowing this call could either help my son or push him further away. "Hello, Dr. Harlow." Chloe's voice was honey-sweet, but I could hear the edge beneath it. What a surprise. "Chloe, I'm calling because I'm worried about Ethan." I kept my tone professional, the same one I use with difficult patients. "His appearance at the wedding." "Oh, you mean how amazing he looked? The toxins just melting away." I gripped my desk, steadying myself. "I mean the visible symptoms of malnutrition." As a medical professional. With all due respect, she cut in, "Your medical degree comes from an institution built on outdated, carnist propaganda. Ethan's never been healthier. He nearly fainted at his own wedding. Because he was cleansing his system. The body purges toxins in waves." "He's losing muscle mass," I interrupted. "His color is poor, and his hands were shaking. These are classic signs of protein and B12 deficiency." The honey disappeared from her voice. "I see what this is. You can't stand that he's finally broken free from your influence. That he's making his own choices." "His own choices?" I couldn't help but laugh. "When was the last time he made a choice you didn't approve of?" Silence crackled over the line. When Chloe spoke again, her voice was eerily calm. "I'm going to pretend this conversation never happened. For Ethan's sake. But let me be clear, your son is a grown man who chose this lifestyle. Who chose me. If you can't respect that, you'll lose him completely." Is that a threat? It's a fact. Ask yourself this: when was the last time he called you without me prompting him? My blood ran cold. She was right. Every recent call had started with, "Chloe thought I should check in. He needs proper nutrition. I tried one last time. At least let him take supplements." Supplements are processed in labs that test on animals. We get everything we need from plants, just like nature intended. Her voice hardened. "This conversation is over. Don't call again unless you're ready to be supportive of our choices." The line went dead. I sat there, trembling with anger and fear, when a knock at my door made me jump. "Rough call?" Dr. Kevin Simmons stood in the doorway, concern etched on his face. "That obvious? You look like you just lost a patient." He closed the door and sat down. "Want to talk about it?" I found myself spilling everything: the wedding, Ethan's deteriorating health, Chloe's manipulation. Kevin listened intently, his frown deepening. "The symptoms you're describing are serious," he said finally. "Without proper supplementation, a restrictive vegan diet can." "I know." I rubbed my temples. But she's got him convinced that supplements are evil and quinoa will solve everything. He won't even listen to me anymore. Sometimes people have to hit bottom before they'll accept help, Kevin said gently. He's my son. I can't just wait for him to collapse. No, but pushing too hard might make things worse. She's already using your concern to drive a wedge between you. I stood up, pacing my office. You didn't see him at the wedding. The way she watches everything he eats, how he looks to her for permission to speak. This isn't just about diet anymore. She's isolating him. Classic signs of controlling behavior, Kevin agreed. But confronting her directly clearly isn't working. I stopped at my window, watching patients and families in the parking lot below. Somewhere out there, my son was getting weaker while his wife convinced him it was strength. I need to document everything, I said finally. Every symptom, every incident. If he ends up in the hospital. When, Kevin corrected quietly. At this rate, it's when, not if. I turned to face him, my decision crystallizing. Then I need to be ready. Because when that happens, she won't be able to spin it away with talk about toxins and cleansing. Just be careful, Kevin warned. People like Chloe can be dangerous when they feel threatened. So can mothers protecting their children, I replied, picking up my phone to text Linda. I needed allies and I needed a plan. Because Chloe was right about one thing, this was war. And I wasn't going to lose my son without a fight. The knock on my door came just after midnight. I'd been reviewing patient files, trying to distract myself from worry, when I heard it. 3 soft, hesitant taps that made my heart stop. Ethan stood on my porch, hunched against the rain. In the porch light, I could see angry red scratches across his forearm. His shirt was torn at the collar. Can I come in? His voice was barely a whisper. I stepped aside, doctor mode kicking in as I cataloged his symptoms, dilated pupils, trembling hands, shallow breathing. But it was the way he flinched when I reached for him that broke my heart. Let me get my first aid kit. I kept my voice steady, professional. Like he was just another patient, not my son showing up looking like he'd been in a fight. He sat at my kitchen table, the same place where he'd done homework, shared breakfasts, told me about his first crush. Now he looked like a stranger in his own childhood home. It's not what you think, he said as I cleaned the scratches. We just had a disagreement. About? He winced, either from the antiseptic or the question. I was hungry. Really hungry. The construction site was brutal today, and I stopped at that deli near work. My hand stilled. The one with the pastrami you used to love? I didn't eat anything, he said quickly. Just looked at the menu. But Chloe. She checks my phone's location history. She saw where I'd been. The cotton ball in my hand was suddenly shredded. I forced myself to breathe slowly. And? She said I was betraying everything we believe in. That even thinking about meat makes me complicit in murder. His voice cracked. When I tried to explain about needing more protein for work, she got upset. Upset enough to do this? I gestured to his arms. She didn't mean to. She was trying to grab my phone, check if I'd taken pictures of the menu too. To tempt myself later. He laughed, a hollow sound that scared me more than the scratches. That's crazy, right? That sounds crazy when I say it out loud. I wanted to shake him, to scream that yes, it was crazy. Instead, I asked, where is she now? At her sister's. She said she needs space to process my betrayal. He rubbed his face. Mom, I don't know what to do. I love her, but I'm so tired. All the time. And sometimes, when I'm at work, I get dizzy. Ethan. But she says that's just the toxins leaving my body. That I need to push through it. That if I really loved her, I'd be stronger. The first aid supplies clattered as my hands shook with rage. And what do you think? He looked up, and for a moment, I saw my little boy again, the one who'd come to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix everything. I think. He swallowed hard. I think I'm scared. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. The color drained from his face as he read the message. She's coming here. He stood up so fast he stumbled. I have to go. She can't know I told you anything. You don't have to leave. Stay here, let me help. You don't understand. She'll say you're poisoning my mind. That you're trying to destroy our marriage. He was already backing toward the door. Please, don't tell her I was here. Don't tell anyone. Ethan, wait. But he was gone, disappearing into the rain like a ghost. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by bloody cotton balls and antiseptic wipes, feeling more helpless than I had since his father died. The doctor in me was screaming about documented abuse, about the need for intervention. The mother in me was ready to hunt Chloe down. My phone lit up with a text from Linda. Everything okay? Saw lights on. I stared at the message, thinking about Ethan's pleading eyes, his trembling hands, the way he jumped at shadows. No, I typed back. Nothing is okay. Need your help. Come over tomorrow. Bringing reinforcements. Because this wasn't just about food anymore. This wasn't even about control. This was about saving my son's life, whether he was ready to be saved or not. And Chloe? She'd just shown her true colors. Now I had proof and a mother's fury to fuel what came next. The call came during my morning rounds. Frank's gruff voice cut through the hospital's ambient noise. Maggie, get to Memorial East now. Ethan collapsed at the construction site. My world narrowed to tunnel vision as I ran to my car. The same hospital where I delivered the news of his father's heart attack 20 years ago. History has a cruel sense of humor. I found Linda in the emergency waiting room, pacing. They're running tests, she said before I could ask. Frank's giving his statement to OSHA. Apparently Ethan was 30 feet up when he passed out. Thank God for the safety harness. My medical training ward with maternal panic. Any word from Chloe? She's on her way. Says it's all our fault for. Linda's jaw tightened. For poisoning his mind with negative energy. Before I could respond, Kevin appeared in scrubs. The look on his face made my stomach drop. Severe malnutrition, he said without preamble. Anemia, dangerously low protein levels, multiple vitamin deficiencies. His body's literally consuming its own muscle mass. Maggie, if he'd been any higher on that scaffold. I gripped Linda's arm for support. Is he conscious? In and out. We're starting him on 4 nutrients, but what do you think you're doing? Chloe's voice cut through the corridor like a whip. She stormed toward us, phone in hand. I've already contacted our holistic healer. We're transferring Ethan to a natural wellness center. The hell you are, I snapped, stepping between her and the treatment area. He nearly died today. Because you've all been undermining his commitment. The stress of your constant judgment is what made him weak. Weak? My voice shook. I just saw his blood work. His body is shutting down because you've convinced him that proteins and supplements are evil. How dare you blame me? I've saved him from. Mom? Everything stopped. Ethan's voice, weak but clear, came from the nearby room. I moved toward it, but Chloe shoved past me. Baby, I'm here. Don't worry, I'm getting you out. Step away from the patient. Kevin's authority filled the room. As his attending physician, I'm ordering a psychiatric evaluation before any decisions about transfer are made. Chloe whirled on him. You can't do that. He's my husband. Watch me. Kevin's voice was steel. Security's already been called. I approached Ethan's bed while Chloe argued with Kevin. My son looked small against the white sheets, tubes running into his arms. His wedding ring was loose on his finger. The harness caught me, he whispered. But I saw Dad. Just for a second. Something inside me broke and reformed. Ethan, listen to me. You're staying here. No wellness centers, no holistic healers. This ends now. You can't make that decision. Chloe shrieked, lunging forward. Security arrived just in time to catch her arms as she tried to reach the 4 bags. Ethan, tell them. Tell them I know what's best for you. But Ethan was looking at his hands, at the prominent bones in his wrists. I can't feel my fingers properly anymore. That's the toxins leaving. No. His voice was quiet but firm. No more toxins. No more cleansing. I want to get better. The look Chloe gave him could have frozen hell. If you let them poison you with their medicines, we're done. Do you understand? Everything we've built, everything we believe in. Everything you believe in, he corrected softly. I believe in staying alive. As security escorted a screaming Chloe out, I watched color return to Ethan's face, not from improved health, but from something else. Relief. Mom? His hand found mine, trembling but sure. I'm sorry. I should have listened. Don't. I squeezed his fingers gently. Just focus on getting stronger. We'll handle everything else later. Kevin appeared with additional 4 bags, including, he added, a restraining order. The police want to talk about those scratches once you're stabilized. I watched the medications drip into my son's veins, each drop pushing back against months of systematic destruction. Chloe's threats echoed from the hallway, but they seemed weaker now, like a spell losing its power. This wasn't the end. Recovery never is. But watching Ethan drift into a peaceful sleep, I finally felt something I hadn't in months: hope. And maybe, just maybe, a little justice. 3 days into Ethan's recovery, I woke to the sound of breaking glass. I'd been sleeping in the guest room of my house, where Ethan was staying after his discharge, when the crash jolted me awake. My first thought was that he'd fallen, his balance still shaky from weakness. Instead, I found Chloe in my kitchen, surrounded by shattered plates and the remains of the protein-rich dinner I'd prepared for Ethan. "You're poisoning him," she snarled, looking wild-eyed and dangerous. "Filling him with corpses and chemicals. Get out before I call the police." I reached for my phone, but she laughed, a high, unhinged sound. "Already called them myself. Told them you're holding my husband against his will. Forcing him to break his ethical principles. That's abuse, Dr. Harlow. Elder abuse, since he's your caretaker." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "The paperwork I filed. About how you're manipulating your vulnerable son, making him care for you because you're too unstable to live alone." She smiled, all teeth. "Your medical license might even come under review." "Mom?" Ethan appeared in the doorway, pale and swaying. "What's going on?" "Baby?" Chloe's voice transformed instantly, becoming soft and concerned. "I'm here to save you. Your mother's been reported for elder abuse. We can go home now, start your cleanse." "The only abuse here was you nearly killing him," I snapped, moving toward Ethan. "Don't touch him." Chloe grabbed a knife from my counter. "He's coming with me." "Chloe, put that down." Ethan's voice shook, but he stood straighter. "You need help." "I need help." The knife wavered. "I'm not the one who betrayed everything we believe in. Who let his mother fill him with poison. It's called food," he said quietly. "And medicine. And I'm not leaving." Red and blue lights flashed through my windows. Chloe's smile returned, triumphant. "Perfect timing. They'll see exactly what kind of monster your mother is." The next few minutes blurred. Police officers entered, taking in the scene: broken glass, a knife-wielding woman, my trembling son. But then Chloe started speaking, her voice steady and reasonable, spinning a tale of concern for her confused husband and his manipulative mother. To my horror, one officer started nodding sympathetically. "She has documentation," he said, showing his partner some papers. "Claims of elder abuse, medical manipulation." "That's ridiculous," I protested. "My son nearly died from malnutrition. We have hospital records." "Natural cleansing protocols," Chloe interrupted smoothly, which his mother interrupted with unnecessary medical intervention. "She's using her position as a doctor to—" "Stop." Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. He pulled up his sleeve, showing the healing scratches. "These are from her. I have pictures dated. And hospital records showing systematic malnutrition under her care. She's been tracking my location, controlling my food, isolating me from family." The officer's expressions shifted. One reached for his handcuffs. "You promised," Chloe whispered, her mask finally cracking. "You promised you'd never betray our cause." "Your cause," Ethan corrected, "nearly killed me." As they led Chloe away, she turned back, her face contorted with rage. "This isn't over. Your mother's career, your reputation, I'll destroy everything. You'll see I was right. You'll come crawling back when their poison makes you sick." The door closed on her screams, leaving my kitchen in eerie silence. Ethan swayed, and I rushed to steady him. "I've got you," I murmured, helping him to a chair. "She's right about one thing," he said quietly. It's not over. She'll keep coming back, keep trying to save me. I looked around my destroyed kitchen, at the wasted food that could have helped my son grow stronger, at the knife still lying where Chloe dropped it. The police would need statements. The hospital would need to be notified about potential security issues. My career might face scrutiny from her false claims. But my son was alive and choosing to stay that way. Let her try, I said, starting to clean up the mess. We've survived worse. Ethan picked up a broom, his hands steadier than they'd been in months. Together this time? Together. Because sometimes rock bottom isn't where you lose everything, it's where you find what's worth fighting for. A week after the kitchen incident, I found Ethan sitting at our old breakfast nook, staring at divorce papers. The morning light caught the returning fullness in his face, the healthy glow slowly replacing months of pallor. Chloe's lawyer delivered these, he said without looking up, along with a manifesto about how I've betrayed the movement. I set down my coffee, choosing my words carefully. How are you feeling about that? Honestly? He traced the edge of the papers. Relieved. And then guilty for feeling relieved. Is that crazy? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Chloe, looking immaculate in sustainable bamboo clothing, a far cry from her wild appearance last week. We should call the police, I said. The restraining order. No. Ethan stood, steadier than he'd been in months. I need to face her. For myself. I opened the door, positioning myself between them. Chloe's practiced smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm here to talk sense into my husband, she announced. Privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of my mother, Ethan replied. Chloe's facade cracked slightly. Fine. You're making a terrible mistake. The movement needs you. I need you. Whatever lies they've told you about your health. Lies. Ethan's laugh was bitter. I have medical records, Chloe. Documentation of systematic malnutrition. Of abuse. That's their interpretation. You were becoming pure, transcending. I was dying. His voice was quiet but firm. I saw the scales at the hospital. Saw my blood work. That wasn't transcendence, it was starvation. Because you were weak. She stepped forward, that familiar zealot's light in her eyes. If you'd just committed fully, pushed through, he would be dead. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Your movement nearly killed my son. Your son. Chloe's laugh was sharp. You lost any right to call him that when you filled him with poison. When you turned him against everything we believe in. Everything you believe in, Ethan corrected. I never believed in it. I believed in you. There's a difference. Something dangerous flashed across Chloe's face. She reached into her bag, pulling out her phone. Fine. Then I'll show everyone who you really are. I have videos, Ethan. Of you admitting to animal cruelty, of you confessing your guilt. One click and your construction company sees their manager advocating for violence. You mean the videos you took while I was malnourished and confused? Ethan's voice strengthened. The ones where you can hear yourself prompting my responses? Go ahead. Show everyone exactly how you operated. I saved you. You controlled me. There's a difference. The phone clattered to the floor. Chloe's composure shattered completely. You're nothing without me, she whispered. Nothing without our cause. Just another mindless consumer, destroying the planet bite by bite. No. Ethan picked up the divorce papers. I'm someone who chooses to live. Who can respect your beliefs without letting them destroy me? There's a difference. A difference, she spat. Is that your mother talking? Did she teach you that while she was force-feeding you corpses? She taught me that love doesn't hurt. Ethan's voice caught. That's the biggest difference of all. Chloe stared at him for a long moment, something almost like understanding flickering across her face. Then it hardened into contempt. You'll regret this, she said, backing toward the door. When the guilt catches up to you, when you realize what you've thrown away. The only thing I regret, Ethan interrupted, is how long it took me to see the difference between passion and poison. After she left, Ethan's hands shook as he signed the divorce papers. I wanted to hold him, to protect him like when he was small, but this wasn't my battle anymore. You kept saying difference, I observed quietly. Because that's what she never understood. He set down the pen. The difference between love and control. Between belief and obsession. He looked up at me, eyes clear. Between surviving and living. I watched my son straighten his shoulders, looking more like himself than he had in years. Sometimes the biggest victories don't come with fanfare or dramatic showdowns. Sometimes they come in quiet moments of clarity, when someone finally sees the difference between what they've endured and what they deserve. And sometimes that's enough. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen watching Ethan prepare dinner. He moved with confidence now, his strength fully returned, chopping vegetables with the same precision he'd inherited from his father. "Mom, taste this." He held out a spoon of something that smelled divine. "It's a plant-based protein curry. Kevin's recipe." I raised an eyebrow. "Still experimenting with vegan dishes? Some of them are actually good." He shrugged. "Just because Chloe was wrong about everything else doesn't mean every single idea was bad." The doorbell rang, and Linda burst in with Frank trailing behind, carrying wine. "Something smells amazing," she announced, then paused. "And vegan." "And not vegan," Ethan replied, gesturing to the grilled chicken on the counter. "I'm learning about balance." Frank uncorked the wine. "Speaking of balance, heard anything from the zealot lately?" "Frank," Linda chided, but Ethan just smiled. "Her last email was different," he said quietly. "She's in therapy. Finally dealing with her own eating disorder, apparently. The control issues, the obsession, it wasn't really about animals at all." I watched him carefully. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved, mostly. That she's getting help. That I got out." He stirred the curry thoughtfully. "She asked to meet, actually. To apologize in person." The kitchen fell silent. Linda shot me a worried look, but I kept my face neutral. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That I'm glad she's healing, but some distances need to be maintained." He tasted the curry, added a pinch of salt. "Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for someone is to let them grow without you." Frank raised his glass. Wise words from the kid who used to eat mud pies. We laughed, and just like that, the tension broke. As we settled around the table, a mix of vegan and non-vegan dishes spread before us, I noticed how naturally Ethan moved between both worlds now. No guilt, no shame, just choices made from strength rather than fear. "Oh!" Linda remembered something. "How's the new project going?" "The one with the shelter." Ethan's face lit up. "We're breaking ground next week. A domestic violence shelter with a teaching kitchen. Helping people rebuild their relationships with food and control. And themselves," I added softly. He caught my eye, understanding passing between us. We'd both learned something about control this year, about when to hold on and when to let go. The conversation flowed easily after that, punctuated by Frank's terrible jokes and Linda's eye-rolling. I sat back, watching my family, smaller than some, perhaps, but stronger for what we'd weathered together. Later, as everyone helped clean up, I found Ethan standing at the window, staring at the garden his father had planted 20 years ago. "Thinking about Dad?" I asked. "Actually, yeah. Remember how he always said you could tell a lot about people by how they feed others?" I nodded, throat tight. "I get it now. It's not just about the food, it's about the intention behind it. Chloe fed me ideology. You feed me love." He paused. "Dad would have seen through her immediately, wouldn't he?" "Probably. He was good at spotting the difference between passion and poison. Like father, like son," he smiled. "Just took me a little longer to learn." As if on cue, his phone buzzed, another email from Chloe. I tensed, but Ethan just glanced at it and put the phone away. "Not even curious?" I asked. "Some stories need to end for others to begin." He picked up a dish towel. "Besides, I'm cooking for that shelter fundraiser tomorrow. Got more important things to focus on." I watched him return to the kitchen, joking with Frank about sustainable dishwashing techniques. The son I'd almost lost was back, but different, stronger, wiser, with scars that had healed into wisdom. Sometimes love means protecting people from harm. Sometimes it means letting them face it head-on. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it means standing in your kitchen on a regular Tuesday night, watching your child choose himself. One meal at a time. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't always come with dramatic gestures or grand revelations. Sometimes it comes in simple moments, in curry recipes and family dinners, in the quiet victory of choosing to nourish rather than destroy. And sometimes that's the greatest revenge of all.
The phone rang shrilly, shattering the peaceful silence of the night. I fumbled for it, squinting at the bright screen. Unknown number. With a groan, I swiped to accept the call. "Hello?" I mumbled, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Jules! Oh, thank God you picked up." The familiar voice of my sister-in-law, Marla, crackled through the line, thick with panic. I sat upright, instantly alert. "Marla? What's wrong? Is everything okay?" No, it's not," she cried, words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "Listen to me, Jules. You need to take this seriously. Evan's been with you for the past 3 weeks. My brow furrowed in confusion. "What? Evan's not here. What are you talking about?" "He is. Check your messages." Marla insisted, her voice rising. "I told you weeks ago that he'd be staying with you for a while. This isn't a joke." I scrambled out of bed, clutching the phone tightly. "Slow down, Marla. I haven't received any messages about Evan staying with me." There was a momentary silence, punctuated by Marla's shaky breaths. "Oh God, I messed up. I really messed up this time." A tendril of dread snaked through me. "Marla, where's Evan? Is he okay?" I don't know," she whimpered. "I haven't seen him in weeks. I thought he was with you." My heart pounded as realization set in. Marla was reckless, prone to impulsive decisions, but this was a new level of carelessness. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm for both our sakes. "All right, listen carefully," I said, my voice firm. "I'm coming over right now. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Marla sniffled, the line crackling. Okay. Just hurry, please." I quickly threw on some clothes, grabbed my keys, and rushed out into the night. As I drove, my mind raced with 1,000 terrifying scenarios. Where could Evan be? Was he safe? And why would Marla lie about him staying with me? The questions swirled endlessly, fueling my growing sense of dread. But one thing was certain. I had to find my nephew and get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. I pulled up to Marla's house, tires crunching on the gravel driveway. My heart thundered in my chest as I rushed to the front door and knocked urgently. After what felt like an eternity, Marla answered, her eyes red and puffy. She ushered me inside without a word. "Where's Evan?" I demanded, whirling to face her. "What the hell is going on, Marla?" She flinched at my tone, wringing her hands nervously. "I don't know. I really thought he was with you." "You said you hadn't seen him in weeks." I exploded. "How could you lose track of your own son like that?" Marla shrank back, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm a terrible mother, I know, but you have to believe me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, making us both jump. Marla shot me a wary glance before hurrying to answer it. My breath caught in my throat when I saw who was standing on the porch, a disheveled Evan, clutching a small backpack to his chest. "Evan!" I gasped, pulling him into a fierce hug. "Where have you been? We were so worried." He mumbled something incoherent, gaze fixed on the floor. Marla hovered nearby, seemingly frozen in shock. "Come inside, honey," I said gently, guiding him towards the living room. "Can you tell us what happened?" Evan sank onto the couch, still refusing to meet our eyes. "Mom said I was going to stay with you for a while," he mumbled. "She told me at the last minute and shoved some clothes into a bag." My eyes narrowed as I looked at Marla, who had the decency to appear ashamed. "She just dropped you off without telling me?" I asked Evan, struggling to keep my anger in check. He finally looked up at me, eyes glistening with hurt. "I knocked for ages, but no one answered. I didn't know what to do, so I just waited." A lump formed in my throat as the weight of Marla's negligence hit me. My own nephew, left abandoned on my doorstep by his reckless mother. "Oh, Evan." I pulled him into another hug, shooting Marla a venomous glare over his shoulder. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But you're safe now, I promise." As I comforted the distraught teenager, rage simmered within me. Marla had crossed a line, putting her child in potential danger with her selfish actions. In that moment, I vowed to do whatever it took to protect Evan from further harm, even if it meant going against my own brother's wife. A few days had passed since Evan's unexpected arrival, and the initial shock had begun to wear off. He had settled into the spare room at my place, seeming more relaxed with each passing day. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging sense that there was more to Marla's story. A sharp knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I frowned, not expecting any visitors, and made my way to the entryway. Peering through the peephole, I was surprised to see Marla's next-door neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins, shifting nervously on my doorstep. "Mrs. Wilkins?" I greeted, cracking the door open. "Is everything all right?" The older woman offered me a strained smile. "Hello, Jules. I'm sorry to bother you, but may I come in for a moment? It's about Marla." My eyebrows shot up, and I swung the door open wider. "Of course, please." Mrs. Wilkins stepped inside, wringing her hands anxiously. "I've been meaning to talk to you for a while now," she began, voice lowered. "I'm terribly worried about Evan." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? What's going on?" She hesitated, glancing around furtively before continuing. "I've noticed some strange behavior from Marla over the past few months. She's been leaving the house at all hours, sometimes not returning until dawn." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You're saying she's been going out all night and leaving Evan alone?" Mrs. Wilkins nodded grimly. "And that's not all. I've seen strange men coming and going from the house when Ray isn't home." The pieces began to click into place, and a wave of nausea washed over me. Could Marla really be so reckless, so utterly neglectful of her own child? "Have you spoken to Ray about this?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. The older woman shook her head. I didn't want to overstep or make accusations without proof, but I just couldn't stay silent any longer, not after what happened with Evan ending up here. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling a fresh surge of anger towards my sister-in-law. How could she put her selfish desires above the well-being of her own flesh and blood? "Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Wilkins," I said finally, meeting her concerned gaze. "I promise I'll get to the bottom of this." As the neighbor left, a newfound determination settled over me. Marla's actions were unforgivable, and I wouldn't rest until Evan was safe, no matter what it took. The revelations from Mrs. Wilkins weighed heavily on my mind as I dialed Ray's number. He picked up after a few rings, his voice tinged with concern. "Jules, is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the difficult conversation ahead. "Ray, we need to talk. It's about Marla and Evan." There was a pause on the other end. "What's going on? Did something happen?" "I had a visitor today," I began, carefully choosing my words. "Mrs. Wilkins came by with some troubling information." I proceeded to relay the neighbor's account of Marla's late-night escapades and the revolving door of strange men. As I spoke, Ray's silence was deafening, punctuated only by his shallow breaths. Finally, he let out a shaky exhale. "Marla's been cheating on me?" The pain in his voice was palpable, and I felt a pang of sympathy for my brother. "That's not even the worst part, Ray. She's been leaving Evan home alone for hours, sometimes all night." A strangled sound escaped his lips, and I could practically envision him running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "How could she—" "Our own son." "I know," I said softly. "It's unforgivable, but we can't let her get away with this." There was a long pause, and for a moment I wondered if the call had dropped. But then Ray spoke again, his voice laced with a newfound resolve. "You're right. Enough is enough. We need to gather evidence, build a case against her." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I was thinking the same thing. We have to protect Evan, no matter what it takes. We spent the next hour strategizing, mapping out a plan to catch Marla in the act. Ray would install hidden cameras around the house, gathering undeniable proof of her infidelity and neglect. Once we had enough evidence, we would confront her and, if necessary, take legal action to ensure Evan's safety. As I hung up the phone, a familiar determination coursed through me. Marla's days of reckless abandon were numbered. She had messed with the wrong family, and now she would face the consequences of her actions. With Ray by my side, I was ready to do whatever it took to bring her downfall, all for the sake of protecting my nephew. Over the next few days, Ray and I put our plan into motion. He had installed hidden cameras throughout the house, strategically placed to capture any incriminating behavior from Marla. Meanwhile, I kept a watchful eye on Evan, ensuring he was safe and well cared for in my home. One evening, as I was helping Evan with his homework, my phone buzzed with a message from Ray. "You need to see this." A knot formed in my stomach as I excused myself and hurried to my bedroom, opening the video file he had sent. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. Marla stumbling through the front door in the early hours of the morning, clearly intoxicated. A strange man followed closely behind, his hands roaming over her in a way that made my skin crawl. I watched in disgust as they tumbled onto the couch, engaged in a heated embrace. The video cut off abruptly, but the damage was done. My blood boiled at the thought of Evan potentially witnessing such a revolting display. More videos trickled in over the following days, each one more damning than the last. Marla entertaining different men, often under the influence of alcohol or substances. Some nights she wouldn't return home at all. The evidence was overwhelming, but a part of me still held out hope that this was all a misunderstanding, a lapse in judgment that Marla would own up to and correct. That hope was shattered when Ray sent me the final video. It was early morning, the sun just peeking over the horizon. Marla's disheveled form appeared on the screen, stumbling into the house and collapsing onto the couch. Moments later, the unmistakable figure of a teenage boy entered the frame. Evan. My heart shattered as I watched my nephew approach his mother, concern etched onto his young face. Marla merely waved him off dismissively, her words slurred and incomprehensible. Tears stung my eyes as the video ended, and I found myself filled with a burning rage unlike anything I'd ever experienced. How could she treat her own child with such callous disregard? In that moment, any lingering doubts or reservations evaporated. Marla had proven herself unfit, unworthy of the precious gift of motherhood. She had sealed her own fate, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. I steeled my resolve, dialing Ray's number with trembling fingers. "It's time," I said, my voice hardened with determination. "We're going to put an end to this, once and for all." The tension was palpable as Ray, Evan, and I gathered in the living room, waiting for Marla to return home. The damning video evidence was queued up, ready to confront her with the harsh reality of her actions. Finally, we heard the telltale sound of her car pulling into the driveway. Ray shot me a resolute look, and I gave him a small nod of encouragement. This was it, the moment of reckoning. The front door burst open and Marla sauntered in, her movements sluggish and uncoordinated. She froze when she saw us assembled, her glazed eyes widening in surprise. "Ray? Jules? What's going on?" She slurred, barely able to form a coherent sentence. Ray stepped forward, his jaw set in a hard line. "We know, Marla. We have proof of everything." She blinked owlishly, swaying on her feet. "Proof of what?" With a flick of the remote, the first video started playing on the TV screen. Marla's face drained of color as the incriminating footage unfolded. Her drunken escapades, the parade of strange men, the night spent away from home. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Ray, I can explain." But Ray was having none of it. "Explain what, Marla? Explain how you've been neglecting our son, abandoning him for nights on end while you're off doing God knows what?" Evan flinched at his father's raised voice, shrinking back into the couch. My heart ached for the poor kid having to witness the sordid unraveling of his family. Marla's eyes darted around the room, a cornered animal seeking an escape. "It's not like that, I swear. I just needed a release, you know? A break from the monotony." I felt bile rise in my throat at her pathetic justification. How could she be so callous, so utterly devoid of maternal instinct? "A break?" Ray spat, his voice dripping with disgust. "At the expense of our child's well-being? You're a disgrace, Marla." Tears streamed down her face as the gravity of the situation finally seemed to hit her. "Please, Ray, don't do this. I'll change, I promise." But it was too little, too late. Ray's mind was made up, his expression hardened with steely determination. "No more lies, no more excuses," he said, his voice low and unwavering. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'll be seeking full custody of Evan." Marla's anguished wails filled the room, but they fell on deaf ears. She had made her choices, and now she would have to face the consequences. As I watched Ray usher a shell-shocked Evan out of the house, I felt a strange sense of resolution wash over me. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now there was hope. Hope for a better future, free from Marla's toxic influence. The fallout from the confrontation was swift and merciless. Within days, Ray had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and Marla's blatant infidelity and neglect. The ironclad evidence we had gathered left her with little recourse but to comply. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Marla's carefully constructed facade crumbled around her. Word of her sordid escapades spread like wildfire through our close-knit community, and she found herself ostracized by friends and acquaintances alike. I'll never forget the look on her face as she arrived at the courthouse for the first hearing. Pale, haggard, a mere shadow of her former self. Gone was the confident, carefree woman I had once known, replaced by a broken shell consumed by the weight of her own transgressions. The judge, a stern-faced woman with little patience for Marla's excuses, made it clear from the outset that the evidence was damning. Ray's steady income and my own willingness to provide a stable home environment for Evan worked heavily in our favor. Mrs. Turner, your actions demonstrate a flagrant disregard for the well-being of your minor child, the judge stated, her voice ringing with authority. Based on the evidence presented, it is abundantly clear that you are unfit to retain sole custody. Marla's anguished sobs echoed through the courtroom as the judge rendered her decision. Ray would be granted full custody of Evan, with Marla permitted only supervised visitation rights. As for the financial ramifications, the judge showed no leniency. Marla was ordered to pay substantial child support, and the marital home, along with most of their assets, would be awarded to Ray to ensure Evan's continued stability. In the blink of an eye, Marla's world had been turned upside down. The lavish lifestyle she had grown accustomed to was snatched away, leaving her to face the harsh realities of her self-inflicted downfall. I watched as she exited the courthouse, enveloped in a cloud of shame and despair, hounded by the flashing cameras of reporters eager to document her disgrace. A small part of me felt a twinge of pity for the broken woman, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of justice served. Marla had made her choices, and now she would have to live with the consequences. Her reckless pursuit of fleeting pleasures had cost her everything: her marriage, her financial security, and most devastatingly, the emotional well-being of her own child. As I rejoined Ray and Evan, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. The storm had passed, leaving in its wake a newfound clarity and determination to build a better future, one where Evan could finally feel safe, loved, and nurtured in a way his own mother had failed to provide. Months passed in the aftermath of Marla's spectacular downfall. The dust had settled, and a new sense of normalcy began to take root in our little family unit. Evan, bless his resilient heart, seemed to thrive under the stability Ray and I provided. The haunted look in his eyes gradually faded, replaced by a renewed spark of life and hope for the future. I'll never forget the pride that swelled in my chest the day he brought home a glowing report card, his academic performance having taken a complete 180 from the previous year's struggles. Seeing him beam with accomplishment, finally free from the weight of his mother's neglect, was worth every ounce of effort we had poured into rectifying the situation. Ray, too, underwent a remarkable transformation. Gone was the broken, disillusioned man who had once stood by helplessly as his world crumbled around him. In his place stood a devoted father, determined to make up for lost time and provide the unwavering love and support Evan had been so sorely lacking. Our little family dynamic fell into an easy rhythm, with Ray and I tag-teaming to ensure Evan never felt alone or adrift. I relished my role as the cool, fun-loving aunt, introducing him to new experiences and indulging his artistic passions, while Ray provided the steady, reassuring presence of a doting father. Of course, not every day was sunshine and rainbows. Evan still grappled with the emotional scars left by Marla's betrayal, and there were moments when the pain became too much, manifesting in bouts of withdrawn silence or explosive outbursts. But we weathered those storms together, offering a united front of unconditional love and understanding. Slowly but surely, Evan began to heal, his once fragile spirit fortifying with each passing day. As for Marla, well, her existence had become little more than a distant echo, a cautionary tale of the depths to which selfishness and depravity could drag a person. The few times she exercised her court-mandated visitation rights, the encounters were strained and stilted, devoid of any genuine maternal connection. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the broken woman she had become, a mere shadow of her former self, cast adrift in a sea of her own making. Her once vibrant beauty had been worn away by the harsh realities of her new life, her eyes haunted by the weight of her mistakes. But those moments of fleeting sympathy were quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude that Evan had been spared from her toxic influence. He was safe, loved, and finally able to flourish, and that was all that truly mattered. As I watched him laugh and joke with Ray over dinner one evening, my heart swelled with a newfound sense of purpose. This, protecting and nurturing the ones we loved, was what family was all about, and I vowed in that moment to never take such a sacred bond for granted again. "Dan, hurry! Something's terribly wrong!" I dropped the laundry basket and sprinted towards the bathroom. My heart pounded in my chest as Dan's voice echoed in my ears. "Dan, what's going on? Oh my God, what happened?" I burst through the door and froze. Dan was slumped in the shower, skin slick with something red. He looked up, grimacing in pain, barely able to move. "Megan, I don't know," he rasped. "It burns." "Hold on," I said, reaching for the shower handle to stop the water. My mind raced. I grabbed a towel and pulled him out, my hands trembling. The red liquid wasn't blood. It was some kind of chemical. "Stay still," I commanded, wrapping the towel around him. "I'm calling 911. As I dialed, my eyes darted around the bathroom, trying to piece together what had happened. The bottle of shampoo laid askew, its contents tainted a strange, vivid hue. Vivienne, Dan's mother, stormed in, eyes wide. "What's happening here?" "It's some kind of chemical. We need an ambulance," I snapped, my voice cracking under the strain. Vivienne's gaze flickered to the shower, then to me, suspicion lurking in her eyes. "How did this happen?" she asked, a tinge of accusation in her tone. "I don't know," I shot back, my voice hollow with fear. "I was doing the laundry when I heard him scream." Soon the paramedics arrived, whisking Dan away. Vivienne and I followed the ambulance to the hospital, tension thick between us. As we waited in the sterile confines of the emergency room, Laura, Dan's sister, appeared, her face a mask of concern. "What happened to Dan?" she demanded, her eyes boring into mine. "He was in the shower," I explained, choosing my words carefully. "Something was in the shampoo. A chemical, I think." Laura crossed her arms, her gaze skeptical. "How could that happen? Who could have done it?" Her insinuation was clear. Already feeling cornered, I fought to keep my composure. "I don't know. Laura, I have no idea." Hours passed like days. Finally, a doctor emerged looking serious. "He's stable," she said, "but whatever was in that shampoo caused severe chemical burns. We're keeping him overnight for observation." "Can we see him?" I asked, voice trembling. The doctor nodded, guiding us to his room. Dan lay there, pale but awake. Relief flooded through me, but it didn't wash away my burning questions. As Vivienne and Laura took turns fussing over him, I stepped back, silently observing. Suspicion gnawed at my soul. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this on purpose, and my gut told me it was someone close. Vivienne caught my eye. "Isn't it strange how this happened right under your nose, Megan?" Her words struck like a dagger, but I didn't flinch. I was determined to uncover the truth and bring the culprit to justice. And if that meant turning this family upside down, so be it. I would protect Dan with every ounce of strength I had. As I walked out of the room, the cold hospital air stinging my skin, I made a silent vow. I would uncover the truth, and I wouldn't rest until whoever did this paid for their crime. It's funny how a single meeting can change everything. I first met Dan at a dog park. His gentle nature shone through immediately. It was autumn, leaves crunching underfoot as we chatted, his easy smile putting me at ease. My dog Max had injured his paw, and Dan, noticing my struggles, rushed to help. "Hey there, need a hand?" he asked, kneeling beside Max. "Thanks, he's been limping." "I think he stepped on something sharp," I replied, relief washing over me. Dan inspected Max's paw with care. "Looks like a small cut. Nothing too serious. I have some antiseptic in my car. Let me grab it." That small act of kindness grew into something more. We spent afternoons at the park, which turned into evenings sharing stories over coffee. Friendship blossomed into love, so naturally that it seemed the most effortless thing in the world. When we discussed our future, everything felt right. But reality has a way of complicating things. Financial issues forced us into a difficult decision. "Megan, moving in with my mom and sister might be our only option for now," Dan sighed one evening, his hand nervously running through his hair. "I don't know, Dan," I replied, unsure. "What if it doesn't go well?" "Let's give it a try. They've been supportive so far." Despite my reservations, I agreed. When I first met Vivienne and Laura, they appeared welcoming, easing my worry a little. "Welcome to the family, Megan," Vivienne said, her smile wide. "We're glad to have you here." "Thanks, Vivienne. I appreciate your kindness," I responded, my cautious optimism growing. Laura, too, was accommodating in the beginning. "If you need anything, just ask," she said, showing me around the house. Those early days were surprisingly smooth. We settled into a routine, and the house was filled with laughter and shared meals. But it didn't last. The warmth began to peel away, revealing the coldness underneath. It started with whispers I wasn't meant to hear. One evening, passing by the kitchen, I overheard Vivienne and Laura. "She's not fit for Dan. We need to do something," Laura muttered. "We'll find a way. She won't last here," Vivienne replied, her voice dripping with malice. My blood ran cold. Silently, I stepped back, my heart pounding. They were plotting against me. Things soon escalated. They began criticizing everything I did. "Why is dinner always late, Megan? Can't you manage even this?" Vivienne's sharp tone cut through the evening peace. "I tried my best." "I'm sorry," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Their hostility was relentless. They found fault in my every action, slowly driving a wedge between Dan and me. One evening, after a minor kitchen mishap, Vivienne accused me of negligence. "This fire could have cost us dearly, Megan. You're reckless," she screamed, causing Dan to look at me with doubt for the first time. "I didn't mean to. It was an accident," I stammered, my eyes meeting Dan's, pleading for understanding. Dan's frustration grew, torn between his loyalty to me and his family. It was a subtle but gnawing change that strained our marriage. The suspicions and accusations mounted, and I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet, setting the stage for the chaos that was yet to come. It wasn't long before the atmosphere in the house grew tense. One evening, as I passed the living room, I overheard Vivienne and Laura talking. I paused, hidden from view. "She's on to us." "We need to be more careful," Laura whispered urgently. "Don't worry, we'll find a way to push her out," Vivienne assured. I gripped the doorframe, swallowing hard. Their plan was more serious than I thought. It didn't take long for them to show their true colors. "Megan, why is the house such a mess?" Laura sneered, entering the kitchen where I was cooking. "I'm cleaning as I go. It'll be tidy by the time I'm done," I said, trying to stay calm. "That's not good enough. This place used to be spotless," she snapped, glaring at me. It continued like that, day after day. Nothing I did was right. The tension between Dan and me grew. He was torn between his loyalty to his family and his love for me. "Megan, they're just set in their ways. Can't you try to get along?" he asked one evening, tension etching his face. "I am trying, Dan, but they're making it impossible," I replied, the strain seeping into my voice. One particularly bad day, a small kitchen fire gave Vivienne the perfect opportunity to escalate her accusations. "You're going to burn the house down!" Vivienne shrieked as I extinguished the flames. "This is unacceptable." "It was an accident," I explained, my face flushing with embarrassment. "An accident that could have been avoided if you were more careful," she shot back, her eyes narrowing. "Dan, you need to talk to her." Dan's eyes shifted between us, uncertainty gnawing at him. "Megan, we need to be more careful," he said slowly. It was then that I saw the doubt in his eyes, a seed of mistrust planted by his mother. The relationship I had worked so hard to build was crumbling. "I can't believe you're taking their side," I whispered, hurt. "I'm not choosing sides," he sighed. "I just want peace." But peace was the last thing Vivienne and Laura wanted. Their actions grew bolder, their control more oppressive. They criticized my every move, making it clear they wanted me out. "Megan, you're just not fitting in here," Laura said one morning, her voice dripping with disdain. "And you're never around to see the mess she makes, Dan," Vivienne added. Dan looked at me, lost. "We have to find a way to make this work," he pleaded. I couldn't believe how blind he was to their manipulation. My efforts were twisted, my intentions questioned at every turn. Vivienne and Laura's poison was slowly eroding our marriage, and Dan was caught in the middle, unable to see the truth. Their harassment grew more intense when Dan wasn't home, their words and actions calculated to break me down. "Why can't you do anything right, Megan?" Vivienne taunted one afternoon. "You've become a burden to this family." "I'm doing my best," I replied, holding back tears. "Your best isn't good enough. You're driving Dan away," Laura piled on. I realized I couldn't live like this. I had to collect evidence of their cruelty. It was the only way to open Dan's eyes. So, I started documenting everything. The overheard conversations, the snide remarks, the orchestrated incidents. One way or another, I would make them pay for what they were doing. Life in the house became a living hell. Vivienne and Laura amped up their harassment, their attacks more vicious when Dan wasn't around. I felt their eyes on me constantly, like predators waiting for the right moment to strike. One day, as I tidied the living room, Vivienne's voice cut through the air. "What is this, Megan? Why hasn't the laundry been done?" "I'm doing it now, Vivienne. I just finished cleaning the kitchen," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "Excuses," she sneered. "Just get it done." As I moved toward the laundry room, I overheard Laura and Vivienne again, their voices low but filled with venom. "She's getting more stubborn. We need to make her understand she's not welcome here," Laura said. "And don't worry," Vivienne replied. "We'll break her." Their words hung in the air, driving a cold dagger through my heart. I clenched my fists, determined not to let them see how much they were getting to me. Dan came home that evening, tired from work, and sensed the tension immediately. "What happened now?" he asked, looking between Vivienne and me. "She left the laundry for hours," Vivienne complained, shaking her head. "How can we live like this?" "I had other chores to do, Dan. You know how much I've been handling," I protested, my voice pleading. "Can't you all just try to get along?" he asked, exasperated. That night I cried silently in our room, feeling more isolated than ever. I had to find a way to show Dan the truth. Every accusation, every hateful word, I documented it all. Recording their conversations was risky, but I needed proof. One evening, Dan attempted to mediate another argument. "Vivienne, Laura, can we just have one peaceful dinner?" he pleaded. "Not when she can't even cook properly," Laura said, pushing her plate away. "This is barely edible." "I followed the recipe," I said, trying to keep my composure. "Clearly, reading isn't your strong suit," Vivienne added, her voice cold. Dan's frustration was evident. "Enough. This can't keep happening." "It's her fault, Dan," Vivienne insisted. "She's not trying to fit in." He looked at me, torn. "Megan, can you just try harder?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded, knowing any argument would fall on deaf ears. After another day of relentless hostility, I overheard a new plan. "We need to disrupt her routine entirely," Vivienne whispered. "'Cause an accident again, something that'll make Dan question her sanity." I decided it was time to gather solid evidence. I set up hidden cameras, recorded conversations, and even took photos of the aftermath of their sabotage. I would expose them for what they truly were. While Dan remained oblivious, I prepared my case. Their carefully constructed facade would crumble, and I would make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. My resolve hardened as each day passed. I would protect my marriage and my sanity, no matter the cost. This was a battle, and I was ready to fight back. The day began like any other, with tension hanging thick in the air. I moved quietly through the house, careful not to provoke Vivienne or Laura, but I knew something wasn't right. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a sense of impending doom. I was in the kitchen when I heard a blood-curdling scream from the bathroom. My heart stopped. It was Dan. Rushing in, I found him on the floor, writhing in pain, his body once again covered in that horrible red liquid. The shampoo bottle lay nearby, its contents poisoned. "Oh my God, Dan!" I dropped to my knees beside him. "Hold on. I'm calling 911. Vivienne and Laura barged in, feigning concern. "What happened?" Vivienne gasped, eyes wide. "I don't know. Someone tampered with the shampoo again," I cried, my hands trembling as I dialed the emergency number. An ambulance arrived quickly, taking Dan away. As I followed, suspicion flared in me. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a deliberate act, and I had a pretty good idea who was behind it. At the hospital, the doctor informed us Dan would be okay with time, but he would suffer from the burns for a while. As I sat by his bedside, my resolve hardened further. I would find proof, and I would make sure Vivienne and Laura paid. When we got home the next day, I decided it was time to confront them. I waited until Dan was resting, then approached the living room where Vivienne and Laura sat talking. "I know what you've been doing," I began, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. "What are you talking about?" Vivienne asked, her face a perfect mask of innocence. "Don't play dumb. The shampoo bottles, the constant harassment. I know you're trying to push me out, I snapped, feeling my anger rise. Laura stood up, her expression turning cold. You have no proof. It's your word against ours. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I do have proof. I played one of the recordings, their voices unmistakable. Vivienne's face paled as the evidence against them played out. You think this will change anything? Laura spat, her facade cracking. Dan will never believe you. We'll see about that, I replied, confidence surging within me. That evening, I sat Dan down and laid out everything. The recordings, the photos, the documented incidents. He listened, eyes widening with every new piece of evidence. Megan, I had no idea, he said, his voice filled with regret. I trusted them. They've been playing us both, Dan. It's time we put an end to this, I said firmly. Dan nodded, determination setting in. You're right, this ends now. Together, we confronted Vivienne and Laura. Dan's voice, once filled with doubt, now held a steely resolve. You need to leave, now. I won't let you hurt Megan or our marriage any longer, he stated firmly. Vivienne tried to plead. Dan, we were doing it for you. She's no good for you. For me? You lied, sabotaged, and hurt the woman I love, Dan snapped. Pack your things and get out. As they retreated, their plans unraveling before them, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming our lives. Vivienne and Laura had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. As they left, I knew this nightmare was coming to an end. Dan and I would rebuild stronger and free from their toxic grasp. When Dan and I kicked Vivienne and Laura out, it felt like a heavy cloud lifted from the house. For the first time in months, there was a sense of peace, but I knew the storm wasn't completely over. One morning, while Dan and I were having breakfast, I noticed his eyes linger on the empty chairs at the table. I can't believe did this, Megan. I grew up trusting them, he said, shaking his head. They manipulated that trust, Dan. We had to do what was right, I replied, reaching for his hand. He nodded, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. What's next? That's up to them. If they come back, we'll be ready, I said, squeezing his hand. Just as we began clearing the table, there was a knock at the door. Dan's body tensed. I'll get it, he said. He returned moments later, a mix of shock and anger on his face. They're back, he murmured. Vivienne and Laura stood on the porch, looking desperate. Vivienne held a suitcase, her eyes tired. Dan, please, you can't do this to us, she begged. We have nowhere else to go. That's not our problem anymore, Dan replied coldly. You brought this on yourselves. Laura stepped forward, her voice trembling with fury. You're choosing her over your own family? You stopped being my family the moment you tried to ruin my life, Dan retorted. I'm not letting you hurt us anymore. Vivienne's eyes welled up with tears. We were just looking out for you. No, I interjected, stepping beside Dan. You were only looking out for yourselves, and you did terrible things to push me out. This ends now. We don't need to drag this out, Dan. Just give us time to figure things out, Laura pleaded. Dan took a deep breath, his face set. I'll give you a week to get your things and go, but after that, you're on your own. Vivienne's tears turned to anger. You'll regret this. Without us, you'll fail. She'll leave you. Enough, Dan shouted, his voice echoing through the hallway. Get your things and leave. They turned away, defeated. As they walked off, I watched them, feeling a mix of relief and lingering unease. These women had caused so much pain, and yet seeing them so broken was bittersweet. Inside, Dan and I worked together to clear out the rest of Vivienne and Laura's things. We boxed up their belongings, setting aside the remnants of their presence in our home. As we sealed the last box, Dan looked at me, his eyes softening. Thank you for standing by me, Megan. I know it hasn't been easy. I love you, Dan. We'll get through this together, I replied. That night, as we settled into bed, the house felt strangely quiet. The absence of Vivienne and Laura's constant presence was jarring, but it allowed us to breathe easier. In the coming days, Dan and I began to rebuild. We found comfort in simple routines, like cooking together or going for evening walks. With Vivienne and Laura gone, our relationship started to heal. Every now and then, I'd hear updates about their struggles through mutual acquaintances. They were pariahs, fighting to find jobs and support themselves. It was karma at its finest. Dan and I had come through the worst. Now, all that was left was to build each other up and look ahead, free from the chains of the past. The week passed, and the day of reckoning arrived. Vivian and Laura stood in the doorway, suitcases packed, eyes filled with a mix of defeat and lingering resentment. "Megan, Dan," Vivian began, her voice thin and fragile. "We're leaving. But remember, you'll regret this." "Save your breath, Mom," Dan said, his eyes cold. "You've done enough damage." Vivian looked like she wanted to say more, but she simply turned away, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her own actions. Laura followed, her gaze filled with unspoken threats. As they walked down the front steps for the last time, I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. This chapter was closing, but the scars they left behind would take time to heal. That evening, Dan and I sat on the couch, sharing a quiet moment. "Do you think they'll be okay out there?" he asked, a hint of guilt in his voice. "They'll have to be. We gave them more chances than they deserved," I replied, squeezing his hand. "They need to face the consequences of their actions." "I know," he sighed. "It's just hard letting go, even after everything." The days that followed were like breaking free from a taut leash. We reclaimed our home, repainting walls and rearranging furniture to make the space ours again. It felt liberating. One evening, as we cooked dinner together, Dan turned to me. "You know, I haven't felt this free in a long time. Thank you for sticking it out." "I love you, Dan. We faced the nightmare together. We can build something even stronger now," I said, feeling a sense of hope. The emotional sunburn from Vivian and Laura's departure began to peel away. We started taking small steps towards reclaiming our happiness. We found joy in simple things like hiking and cooking new recipes. On one of our walks, Dan stopped suddenly, looking at me with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "Megan, I promise I'll never let anyone come between us again." "We're a team, Dan. We've shown how strong we can be together," I replied, locking eyes with him. The days grew longer, our lives filled with the mundane but comforting routines of stability. And though we occasionally heard updates about Vivian and Laura's struggles through friends and social media, they struggled to find employment and became social pariahs. These updates only reinforced the justice we had sought. One evening, Dan's old friend Jake called him. I could hear the muffled conversation from the kitchen, the tone serious but tinged with satisfaction. "Yeah, I heard they're barely getting by. People finally saw through their facade," Dan said, shaking his head. After the call, he turned to me. "Jake says they're not doing well. Karma caught up with them." "Good. Maybe now they'll understand the pain they caused," I said, feeling a sense of closure. We had dinner, the atmosphere lighter. Dan looked at me and smiled. "We've come through so much, Megan. I'm proud of us." "Me too," I replied. "We're stronger now." As we clinked our glasses together, I knew the worst was behind us. We were free to build a future on a foundation of resilience and mutual support. And for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely hopeful about what lay ahead. Months passed, and life gradually stabilized. The house breathed easier, every corner free from the tension that once strangled it. Dan and I started to find a new rhythm, our bond growing stronger with each shared experience. One Saturday morning, as we sipped coffee on the porch, Dan turned to me with a smile. "You know, Megan, I feel like we've turned a corner. We're finally living again, not just surviving." I nodded, letting the warmth of the sun and his words soak in. "It's taken time, but we've rebuilt, piece by piece." To celebrate our new beginning, we decided to revive an old hobby we had put aside during the turmoil. Hiking had always been our escape, a sanctuary in nature. We packed a lunch and headed to our favorite trail. As we climbed, the silence of the forest felt cleansing. "Remember our first hike here?" Dan asked, pausing to catch his breath. "I do," I replied, smiling at the memory. "You pretended to be an expert on wildflowers and nearly stepped on a snake." Dan laughed, a sound that had become rare in those dark days. "I was trying to impress you. Guess it worked." We reached a clearing and settled on a blanket, looking out over the valley below. The view was breathtaking, a reminder of life's simple beauties. "Lately, I've been thinking a lot about the future," Dan said, his voice serious but hopeful. "Good things, I hope," I responded, lying back and looking up at the sky. "Yeah, great things," he assured, leaning close. "I want us to keep building on what we've started. Together, always." I reached for his hand, feeling the solid connection between us. "I want that too, Dan. We've come through so much. Now it's time to enjoy what we've fought for." Back at home, our evenings filled with cooking new dishes, laughing over foibles, and planning weekend getaways. The fear and tension had dissipated, replaced by a comforting routine we had forged together. Every now and again, I would hear snippets about Vivienne and Laura's continuing struggles. They were social pariahs, unable to find stable jobs, their manipulative ways catching up with them. These updates didn't bring me joy, but they did offer a sense of justice. One Thursday evening, as we cleared the dinner table, Dan's friend Jake called again. Dan listened intently, occasionally nodding. Afterward, he turned to me. Jake says they've hit rock bottom. No job prospects, not even from distant relatives. Part of me pities them, I admitted, but they chose their path. They did, Dan agreed, and we've chosen ours, a better one. As the months rolled on, we invested more in our relationship and future. We redecorated the house, filling it with things we both loved. The walls no longer felt like silent witnesses to hostility, but instead echoed with laughter and love. One evening, after a particularly fulfilling day of hiking and cooking a wonderful dinner together, Dan looked at me with genuine affection. "Megan, I'm grateful every day that you stuck with me through everything." "I'm grateful we came out stronger," I replied, feeling the weight of the past lift fully off my shoulders. As we sat together, looking forward to a future untainted by previous nightmares, it was clear we had weathered the storm and emerged resilient, ready for whatever life had in store. "We've come through the worst," I said, echoing a sentiment that had kept us going. "Now, all that's left is to build each other up." And with that, we closed the chapter on a painful past, stepping into a hopeful and promising future. Our bond, weathered but unbroken, was stronger than ever, and we were ready to face whatever challenges came our way, together. The deafening silence hung thick in the air as I stared at my son Aaron, his face contorted with barely concealed rage. My heart pounded, dreading the words I knew were coming. "Mom, get in here. Now!" Aaron barked, his tone leaving no room for argument. I followed him into the living room, my stomach twisting into knots at the sight of my daughter-in-law, Valerie, smirking with satisfaction. "What's going on?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. "Well, Marilyn," Valerie began, her voice dripping with disdain, "it seems your other son, Jake, is finally coming home with his pregnant wife." I felt a fleeting moment of joy at the thought of seeing Jake again, but Valerie's malicious smile quickly extinguished that spark. "So, Marilyn," she continued, "it's time for you to move out. We need the space." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to show any weakness. Years of hardship had forged an iron resilience within me. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I quietly agreed, already formulating my next move. As Valerie gloated, I turned and walked away, my mind racing back to the day my world had first come crashing down. It was a sunny afternoon when the doorbell rang, and I answered to find two solemn-faced police officers on my doorstep. Their words still echoed in my mind. "There's been an accident, ma'am. Your husband, Edward." In that moment, my life as a single mother began. Edward's dream of starting a family auto repair shop had been our driving force, but without him, it seemed impossibly out of reach. Still, I refused to let his memory fade. I poured every ounce of my being into raising our sons, Aaron and Jake, while keeping Edward's dream alive. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to give them the life Edward had envisioned. Now, decades later, it seemed that all my sacrifices had been for naught. Aaron and Valerie had wormed their way into my home, leeching off my generosity and goodwill, and now they sought to cast me aside like yesterday's trash. But they didn't know the true extent of my resolve. Edward's legacy would not be so easily extinguished. As I lay in bed that night, memories from the past came flooding back, unbidden. Edward's face swam before my eyes, his warm smile and gentle eyes a stark contrast to the harsh realities I now faced. It had been years since the accident, but the pain was still raw, like an open wound that refused to heal. I remembered the long, sleepless nights spent crying myself to exhaustion, wondering how I would ever make it on my own. But Edward's dream had been my guiding light, the beacon that kept me going even when the darkness felt suffocating. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I poured myself into raising our sons and building the auto repair shop he had envisioned. Aaron had been a sullen child, quick to anger and slow to show affection. Even then, I had sensed a darkness within him, a selfishness that I feared would only grow with time. Jake, on the other hand, had been my sunshine, a bright and inquisitive boy who shared his father's passion for mechanics. As the years passed, my fears about Aaron were realized. He grew more distant, resentful of the sacrifices I had made to keep our family afloat. Valerie's arrival only fueled the fire, her manipulative ways twisting Aaron's thoughts and clouding his judgment. "Why do we have to live in this dump?" Aaron had snarled one day, his eyes narrowed with disdain as he surveyed the modest home I had worked so hard to maintain. "This was your father's dream," I had tried to explain, but the words fell on deaf ears. Valerie had simply scoffed, her painted lips curled into a sneer. "Well, your father's not here anymore, is he? It's time to move on." Their cruelty cut deep, but I refused to let them see the pain they inflicted. I had endured too much to be broken by their petty insults. As the years wore on, their behavior only grew more erratic and entitled. They expected me to cater to their every whim, treating me like a servant in my own home. And through it all, I remained steadfast, clinging to the hope that one day they would see the error of their ways. But that day never came. Instead, they turned their venom on young Kyle, my grandson, and the one ray of light in my increasingly bleak existence. They resented his natural talent for mechanics, a gift he had inherited from his grandfather, and they sought to crush his spirit at every turn. I remember the day I found Kyle huddled in the garage, his small hands trembling as he tinkered with an old engine. His face had been streaked with tears, but his eyes had shone with a determination far beyond his years. "I want to be just like Grandpa," he had whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the wrench in his hand. In that moment, I knew that I had to protect him, no matter the cost. Edward's legacy would live on through Kyle, and I would ensure that Aaron and Valerie's darkness never extinguished that flickering flame. The years ticked by, and Aaron and Valerie's grip on my life grew ever tighter. At first, they had made promises of contributing to the household expenses, of pulling their weight and helping to keep Edward's dream alive. But those promises quickly turned to dust, swept away by their insatiable greed and sense of entitlement. "We're family," Aaron had sneered when I dared to broach the subject of their financial responsibilities. "You owe us." Valerie had simply smirked, her beady eyes glinting with malice. "Besides, you'd never turn us out on the street, would you? Not with little Kyle to think about." And so they had dug their claws in deeper, leeching off my hard-earned money and treating me like a servant in my own home. I became the de facto caretaker for Kyle, responsible for his every need while his own parents neglected him in favor of their selfish pursuits. "Grandma, why doesn't Mommy ever play with me?" Kyle had asked one day, his big eyes filled with a sadness no child should ever know. My heart had ached for him, but I knew that any confrontation with Aaron and Valerie would only make matters worse. Instead, I had pulled him close, whispering reassurances and promising that everything would be all right. But deep down, I harbored growing suspicions about Valerie's true nature. There was a calculating gleam in her eyes, a hunger that could never be sated. I feared that she saw Kyle as a pawn in her twisted game, a tool to be used and discarded at her whim. "He's such a sweet boy," she would coo, her false affection making my skin crawl. "It would be a shame if anything were to happen to him." The veiled threats hung heavy in the air, and I knew that I had to tread carefully. Aaron was under Valerie's spell, blinded by her manipulations and unable to see the monster she truly was. So I bided my time, playing the dutiful matriarch while secretly plotting my next move. I would not let them destroy everything Edward had worked for, everything he had sacrificed to build a better life for our family. One evening, as I was tidying up the living room, I noticed a loose floorboard near the fireplace. Curiosity piqued, I pried it up, and my heart skipped a beat at the sight of a yellowed envelope tucked away beneath. With trembling hands, I opened it, my eyes scanning the familiar handwriting that adorned the pages within. It was a letter from Edward, written in the final days before his untimely death. "My dearest Marilyn," it began, "if you're reading this, then I fear the worst has come to pass." As I read on, the true depth of Edward's foresight became clear. He had sensed the darkness brewing within Aaron, the greed that threatened to tear our family apart, and in his infinite wisdom, he had made provisions to ensure that his legacy would be carried on by the son who shared his passion. and integrity. The business, the dream we built together, must be passed on to Jake, the letter stated, Edward's words echoing across the decades like a clarion call. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the letter to my chest, a newfound determination surging within me. Edward had seen the truth, had known the path our family would take, and he had left me the means to ensure that his vision would not be corrupted by Aaron and Valerie's selfish desires. From that moment on, I knew that I could no longer remain passive. The time had come to fight for Edward's legacy, to protect our family's future from those who sought to destroy it, and with the letter as my guide, I would ensure that the sacrifices we had made would not be in vain. Armed with Edward's letter, I steeled my resolve to confront Aaron and Valerie about the future of the family business. I knew they would not relinquish control easily, but I was determined to honor my late husband's wishes. One evening, after Kyle had gone to bed, I gathered them in the living room, the crumpled letter clutched tightly in my hand. "We need to talk about the shop," I said, my voice trembling slightly, despite my best efforts to appear calm. Aaron scoffed, his eyes narrowing with disdain. "What's there to talk about? It's ours, plain and simple." Valerie nodded, her painted lips curling into a smug smile. "Yeah, Marilyn. After all, we've been the ones taking care of you all these years. It's the least you can do to repay us." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. "That's not true, and you know it. This shop was Edward's dream, and he left clear instructions that it should go to Jake." Brandishing the letter, I began to read aloud, my voice growing stronger with each word. "The business, the dream we built together, must be passed on to Jake." Aaron's face contorted with rage, and he lurched forward, snatching the letter from my hands. "This means nothing," he shouted, crumpling the pages in his fist. "Jake's off living his own life, while we've been here, stuck in this dump, catering to your every whim." Valerie placed a placating hand on his arm, her eyes glinting with cunning. Now, dear, let's not get too worked up. I'm sure we can come to some sort of arrangement." She turned to me, her saccharine smile sending chills down my spine. "After all, we wouldn't want anything to happen to dear little Kyle, would we?" The veiled threat hung in the air, and I felt my heart sink. They were willing to stoop to any depths, even using my own grandson as leverage against me. But I refused to back down, not when so much was at stake. "You wouldn't dare," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. Aaron sneered, his eyes cold and calculating. "Try us, old woman. We're not going to let you take away what's rightfully ours." In that moment, I realized the true depths of their depravity. They saw Kyle as nothing more than a pawn, a means to an end. And if I didn't tread carefully, they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. So, with a heavy heart, I made the decision to cede partial control of the business to them, at least for the time being. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I knew that it was the only way to keep Kyle safe and buy myself some time. "Fine," I said, my voice hollow and defeated. "You can have a share of the business, but only until Jake returns. Then we'll sort out the rest." Aaron's smirk was triumphant, but Valerie's eyes narrowed with suspicion. She knew that I was up to something, but for now, she seemed content to let me believe I had won a small victory. As they left the room, their laughter echoing like a cruel taunt, I felt a deep sense of shame settle over me. I had compromised Edward's wishes, all in the name of protecting Kyle from their wrath. But deep down, I knew that this was only a temporary setback. I would bide my time, gather my strength, and when the moment was right, I would strike back with everything I had. Aaron and Valerie had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and they would soon learn the true depths of a mother's love and determination. In the days that followed, I watched Kyle with a heavy heart, keenly aware of the emotional turmoil he was enduring. His once vibrant spirit seemed to dim, his movements robotic and detached as he went about his daily routine. "Kyle, honey, come help Grandma in the garden," I would call out, desperate to coax a smile from his solemn face. He would dutifully oblige, his small hands meticulously tending to the flower beds. But his eyes remained distant, haunted by demons that no child should ever have to face. It was only when he slipped away to the garage, surrounded by the tools and machinery that had once been his grandfather's domain, that I glimpsed the spark of life still flickering within him. His fingers would dance across the worn metal, coaxing life from engines long since abandoned, and for a brief moment, the weight of the world would lift from his shoulders. "You have such a gift, my darling," I would whisper, watching in awe as he worked with a skill far beyond his years. He would glance up at me, his eyes shining with a fleeting joy before the shadows crept back in, stealing away the light I so desperately clung to. Valerie, of course, saw none of this. Her only concern was maintaining the illusion of a perfect family, a facade to hide the cracks that were rapidly spreading beneath the surface. She would parade Kyle around like a prized possession, doting on him in front of others while neglecting his most basic needs behind closed doors. "Isn't he just the most precious thing?" she would gush, her false affection making my stomach churn. And all the while Aaron would look on with indifference, his only interest in how Kyle's existence could benefit him. "The kid's a liability," he muttered one evening, his words slurring from one too many drinks. "We should have gotten rid of him when we had the chance." Valerie had simply laughed, her cruel amusement cutting me to the core. "Don't be silly, dear. He's our ticket to the good life, remember?" I had bitten my tongue, swallowing the bitter taste of bile that rose in my throat. They saw Kyle as nothing more than a tool, a means to an end in their twisted quest for power and control. But I knew better. I saw the pain etched into every line of his young face, the scars left by years of neglect and emotional abuse. And I vowed, in that moment, that I would do whatever it took to protect him, to nurture the spark of Edward's spirit that still burned bright within him. As the days turned to weeks, Valerie's pressure on Kyle only intensified. She would berate him for the slightest misstep, her harsh words cutting deeper than any physical wound. "Can't you do anything right?" she would snarl, her eyes blazing with contempt. And through it all, Kyle would remain stoic, his jaw clenched tight as he weathered the storm of her fury. But I saw the toll it was taking, the way his shoulders sagged a little more each day, the light in his eyes growing dimmer and dimmer. It was then that I knew I could no longer stand idly by. The time had come to take a stand, to put an end to Aaron and Valerie's reign of terror once and for all. I would bide my time, gather my strength, and when the moment was right, I would strike with everything I had. Edward's legacy, our family's future, depended on it, and I would not let them destroy everything we had fought so hard to build. The air was thick with tension as I descended the stairs, drawn by the sound of raised voices emanating from the living room. As I rounded the corner, the sight that greeted me sent a chill down my spine. There stood Kyle, now a grown man, his face flushed with righteous anger as he glared at Aaron and Valerie. In his hand was the crumpled letter from Edward, the very same pages I had fought so hard to protect all those years ago. "You two have gone too far," Kyle spat, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Grandma doesn't deserve this. None of us do." Aaron sneered, his lips curling into a cruel sneer. "And what exactly are you going to do about it, boy? This is our house, our business. You're nothing but a useless freeloader." Valerie nodded in agreement, her eyes glinting with malice. "That's right. We've been the ones keeping this family afloat while your precious grandmother squandered our money on her sentimental nonsense." Kyle's fists clenched at his sides, the muscles in his jaw twitching as he fought to maintain his composure. "That's not true, and you know it. Grandpa left this business to Uncle Jake, not you two leeches." He brandished the letter, thrusting it towards them with a trembling hand. "This proves it. You've been lying and manipulating us from the start, all to get your greedy hands on what was never yours to begin with." Aaron's face contorted with rage, and he lunged forward, snatching the letter from Kyle's grasp. "You think this worthless piece of paper means anything?" he snarled, tearing it to shreds before our eyes. Valerie cackled, her laughter grating on my ears like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, Kyle, you poor deluded boy. Your grandfather's wishes mean nothing to us. We're the ones in control now, and if you know what's good for you, you'll stay out of our way." But Kyle stood his ground, his eyes blazing with determination. "Not anymore," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I won't let you two snakes poison this family any longer." Aaron scoffed, his lips twisting into a sneer. "And what are you going to do? Call the police? We're family, you idiot. They'll never believe your lies over ours." It was then that I knew I had to step in, to lend my support to the grandson I had fought so hard to protect. Summoning every ounce of courage I possessed, I stepped forward, my voice ringing out clear and strong. "He's not lying," I declared, my gaze never wavering from Aaron and Valerie's stunned faces. "I've kept the truth hidden for far too long, but no more. Edward's legacy belongs to Jake, and I won't let you two vultures pick it apart any longer." Kyle's eyes widened with surprise, but there was a glimmer of hope in their depths, a silent gratitude that steeled my resolve even further. Valerie's face twisted into an ugly snarl, her lips peeling back to reveal yellowed teeth. "You ungrateful old hag," she hissed, taking a menacing step forward. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" But before she could advance any further, Kyle stepped between us, his broad shoulders forming a protective barrier. "That's enough," he growled, his voice laced with a warning. "You two have tormented this family for far too long. It's time for you to leave, and if you don't go willingly, I'll make sure the authorities get involved." Aaron's eyes narrowed, his jaw working furiously as he weighed his options. Finally, he seemed to deflate, his bravado crumbling in the face of Kyle's unwavering defiance. "Fine," he spat, grabbing Valerie's arm and dragging her towards the door. "But don't think this is over. We'll be back, and when we do, you'll regret the day you ever crossed us." With that final, ominous threat hanging in the air, they were gone, leaving Kyle and me to survey the wreckage of our once happy home. In the days that followed Aaron and Valerie's explosive departure, a sense of uneasy calm settled over the house. Kyle wasted no time in officially taking the reins of the family business, his skilled hands breathing new life into the worn tools and machinery that had once been his grandfather's domain. "This is how it was always meant to be," he murmured one evening as we surveyed the freshly reorganized garage, a proud smile tugging at his lips. I couldn't help but share in his joy, the weight of decades of struggle finally lifting from my shoulders. Edward's dream was safe, his legacy secure in the capable hands of the grandson he had always seen so much potential in. But our moment of triumph was short-lived, as Aaron and Valerie's threats soon became a harsh reality. The phone calls began almost immediately, a constant barrage of vile insults and empty promises of retribution. "You'll pay for this, you meddling old bat," Valerie's shrill voice would screech through the receiver, her words laced with venom. Aaron, too, would chime in with his own brand of vitriol, his threats growing increasingly unhinged with each passing day. "We're coming for you, Mom," he snarled during one particularly chilling call. "And when we do, you'll wish you'd never crossed us." Kyle, bless his brave heart, remained steadfast in the face of their intimidation tactics, his resolve only strengthening with each new attack. "They're all bark and no bite," he assured me, his calloused hand giving mine a gentle squeeze. "We've got the law on our side now." True to his word, Kyle wasted no time in seeking legal counsel, determined to protect our family from Aaron and Valerie's wrath once and for all. With the help of a skilled attorney and the support of our tight-knit community, we built an ironclad case against the pair, documenting years of emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and outright criminal behavior. The court proceedings were grueling, with Aaron and Valerie pulling out every underhanded trick in the book to try and discredit us. But in the end, the overwhelming weight of evidence proved too much for even their silver tongues to overcome. As the judge read out the verdict, guilty on all counts, a collective sigh of relief rippled through the courtroom. Aaron and Valerie were led away in handcuffs, their faces twisted into masks of stunned disbelief, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. In the aftermath of their downfall, Kyle threw himself into rebuilding the family business, his boundless energy and passion a testament to the depths of Edward's enduring influence. Day by day, the shop began to take shape, each freshly painted wall and gleaming tool a symbol of our hard-won victory. "I want this to be a place Grandpa would be proud of," Kyle confided in me one evening as we surveyed the nearly completed space. A legacy built on hard work, integrity, and a love for the craft. His words filled me with a profound sense of pride, a recognition that despite all the darkness we had endured, the true essence of our family had prevailed. Edward's spirit lived on, not just in the legacy of the business, but in the unwavering determination that had carried us through even the darkest of times. As the sun set on that momentous day, I found myself lost in quiet reflection, marveling at the strength that had been forged from the fires of our hardship. We had faced down the demons of greed and manipulation, emerging battered but unbroken, our bond as a family stronger than ever before. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united by the unbreakable ties of love, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to honor the dreams that had set us on this path so many years ago. Years passed in a blur of hard work and quiet contentment, the shadows of Aaron and Valerie's treachery fading into distant memory. Kyle devoted himself to the family business with a passion that would have made Edward proud, his skilled hands coaxing life from even the most stubborn of engines. And then, one crisp autumn day, a new chapter began to unfold. The joyous arrival of Kyle's first child, a beautiful baby girl with eyes that sparkled with the same inquisitive spirit that had defined her grandfather all those years ago. As I cradled the precious bundle in my arms, my heart swelled with a love so pure, so profound, that it threatened to burst forth from my very being. This tiny life, this incredible gift, was living proof that our family's legacy would endure, that the sacrifices of the past had not been in vain. "Hey there, little one," Kyle murmured, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed down at his daughter with unbridled adoration. "I'm your daddy, and I promise I'm going to give you the world." In that moment, I was transported back in time, my mind's eye conjuring up the image of a younger Kyle, his small hands tinkering away in the garage, his eyes alight with the same determination that now shone so brightly in his own child's face. It was a poignant reminder of the cyclical nature of life, of how the bonds forged between generations can transcend even the darkest of adversities. Edward's spirit lived on, not just in the successful business that bore his name, but in the unwavering love and commitment that bound our family together. As the years rolled by, I found myself cherishing these quiet moments more and more, basking in the simple joys of watching Kyle's daughter grow and thrive under the watchful guidance of her doting parents. They were a testament to the power of resilience, of pushing through the darkness and emerging into the warm embrace of a brighter tomorrow. One evening, as the setting sun cast a warm glow over the now bustling family garage, Kyle pulled me aside, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and determination. "Grandma," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to know that everything we've built here, all of this success, it's because of you. Your strength, your unwavering love for our family, it's what kept us going through the darkest of times." I opened my mouth to protest, but he gently silenced me with a shake of his head. "No, let me finish. You sacrificed so much to ensure that Grandpa's dream lived on, and I want you to know that it hasn't been in vain. This business, our family, it's all a testament to the legacy you fought so hard to protect." His gaze shifted, sweeping over the organized chaos of the garage, the gleaming tools and half-assembled engines, a vibrant tapestry of hard work and passion. "I want to build on that legacy, to take what Grandpa started and turn it into something even greater. A place where people can come and learn the craft, where we can pass on the values of integrity, hard work, and love for the art of mechanics." As he spoke, I felt a swell of pride unlike anything I had ever experienced, a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this moment. The road had been long and fraught with obstacles, but through it all, the unbreakable bonds of family had sustained us, guiding us towards this moment of triumph and renewal. With tears glistening in my eyes, I reached out and took Kyle's calloused hand in mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you, my darling," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "And so am I. You've taken his dream and made it into something truly extraordinary, and I know that no matter what challenges lie ahead, our family's legacy is in the best of hands." The shrill ringing of my phone jolted me awake. It was Eve, my daughter-in-law's voice, trembling with distress. "Marjorie, it's Eve. You need to come now. It's about the kids." My heart sank as I rushed to get dressed. I knew something was terribly wrong. Eve and my son Declan had been having problems, but I never imagined it would escalate to a point where the children were involved. 30 minutes later, I pulled up to Declan's suburban home. The porch light was on, and a small figure huddled on the steps, my 14-year-old granddaughter, Lila. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, her face pale and tear-stained. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Mom and Dad? They left, just went on a trip and left us here." I gathered her in my arms, her thin frame shivering against the cold night air. "Oh, sweetheart, where's Tess, your sister?" Lila nodded towards the door. "Inside. She has a key." We found Tess, Declan's 16-year-old daughter from his second marriage to Elise, sitting on the kitchen floor. Her eyes were puffy, but she remained stoic, a stark contrast to Lila's fragility. "Tess, are you both all right?" I asked, dreading the answer. She shook her head slowly. "We haven't eaten since yesterday morning. The fridge is empty, and there's no food in the house." A wave of anger washed over me. How could Declan and Elise do this to their own children? I took a deep breath, suppressing the fury simmering within me. "All right, girls, pack a bag each. You're coming home with me." As they gathered their essentials, I surveyed the house, a mess of empty takeout containers and discarded clutter. In the living room, a half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on the coffee table, a grim reminder of Declan's increasing struggle with alcoholism. The drive back to my place was silent, save for the occasional sniffle from Lila. I glanced in the rearview mirror, catching Tess's steely gaze. She was putting up a brave front, but I could see the pain flickering behind her eyes. Once we arrived, I ushered them inside, ensuring they were fed and comfortable. As they settled in, I knew that this was just the beginning. I would not let Declan and Elise get away with this neglect. They had crossed a line, and I was determined to fight for the well-being of my grandchildren, no matter the cost. After settling the girls in for the night, I sat in the dimly lit living room, my mind racing. How could Declan have fallen so far? The loving son I had raised, now reduced to a neglectful father, abandoning his own children. A familiar sense of disappointment welled up within me, but this time it was tinged with a newfound fury. "Grandma?" I turned to see Lila standing in the doorway, her eyes puffy and red. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "It's been happening for a while," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The fighting, the drinking. Mom and Dad would leave us alone for days sometimes." My heart broke as she revealed the extent of their suffering. "Oh, sweetheart, why didn't you tell me sooner?" She shrugged, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "We were scared. Dad said if we talked, he'd send us away." I pulled her into a tight embrace, anger boiling inside me. How dare Declan threaten his own children? The man I had raised would never have stooped so low. "You're safe now, Lila," I promised. "I won't let them hurt you or Tess ever again." The next morning I woke early and began making arrangements. First I called Eve, Declan's ex-wife and Lila's mother. Her voice wavered as she apologized profusely for not acting sooner. "I had no idea it was this bad, Marjorie," she said, her words laced with guilt. "If I had known, I would have taken Lila away from that situation in a heartbeat." I assured her that the girls were safe with me, promising to keep her updated on any developments. Next, I reached out to Bill Radley, the family lawyer and a close friend of my late husband. He agreed to meet us later that day to discuss legal options. As the girls ate breakfast, I noticed Tess's guarded demeanor. She barely made eye contact, keeping her responses curt and dismissive. "Tess, honey," I said gently, "I know this is difficult, but I want you to feel comfortable here. You and Lila are family." She finally looked up, her eyes brimming with a mixture of sadness and anger. "My mom, she knew what was happening," Tess muttered. "She just didn't care." My stomach twisted at the realization. Elise, the woman Declan had left Eve for, was just as culpable in this neglect. I reached across the table and squeezed Tess's hand, silently vowing to hold them both accountable. Later that afternoon, Bill arrived, his brow furrowed with concern. As I relayed the details of the past few days, his expression hardened. "Declan and Elise have crossed a line," he said gravely. "Abandoning minors, neglect, potential substance abuse issues, we have grounds to seek an emergency custody order and freeze their assets." I nodded, resolve stealing within me. It was time to take action, not just for the sake of Lila and Tess, but to dismantle the toxic legacy Declan had created. "Do whatever it takes, Bill," I said firmly. "I won't let them get away with this." As he left to set the wheels in motion, I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose. a determination to right the wrongs inflicted upon my grandchildren and restore the honor of our family name. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Bill had sprung into action, filing for an emergency custody order and gathering evidence of Declan and Elise's neglect. Meanwhile, I focused on creating a stable environment for Lila and Tess, ensuring they felt safe and cared for. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Tess spoke up, her voice surprisingly steady. "I know where Mom keeps her spare key to Dad's place," she said, avoiding eye contact. "We could go back and look for proof of what they've been up to." I hesitated, not wanting to traumatize the girls further by revisiting that toxic environment. But Tess had a point. Gathering concrete evidence would strengthen our case. "Are you sure you're up for that, sweetheart?" I asked gently. She nodded, her jaw set in determination. "If it means putting them away for what they did, I'll do it." The next day, we made our way to Declan's house, the silence in the car thick with tension. Tess led us to the side gate, producing a small key from her pocket. "Mom always kept a spare in case Dad locked himself out," she explained, her voice emotionless. As we stepped inside, the stale air reeked of cigarette smoke and stale alcohol. The living room was a disaster zone, with empty bottles and discarded takeout containers littering every surface. "This is how it always looked," Lila whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and sadness. I fought back the urge to break down at the sight of my grandchildren's living conditions. Instead, I steeled myself, determined to gather the evidence we needed. We methodically searched the house, taking photos and collecting any incriminating items we could find. In the study, I stumbled upon a stack of unpaid bills and notices from Declan's bank, warning of overdrawn accounts. "He was gambling again," Tess said flatly, her eyes fixed on the paperwork. Mom knew, but she didn't care as long as he kept her in designer clothes. My heart broke for these girls, forced to endure such a toxic environment at the hands of their own parents. Elise's callous disregard for her family's well-being only fueled my determination to see justice served. As we prepared to leave, Lila paused in the doorway of her old bedroom, her eyes welling with tears. "I used to hide in here when they fought," she whispered, clutching a tattered stuffed animal to her chest. "I'd cover my ears and pretend I was somewhere else." Without a word, I pulled her into a tight embrace, silently vowing to never let her feel that way again. These children had been through enough trauma. It was time for their suffering to end. On the drive back, Tess spoke up, her voice laced with a newfound determination. "We have to make them pay for this, Grandma," she said, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. "They don't deserve to get away with how they treated us." I met her gaze in the rearview mirror, nodding solemnly. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I assured her. "They'll face the consequences of their actions. I promise you that." As we pulled into the driveway, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the sake of my grandchildren, I was prepared to go to any lengths necessary to dismantle the toxic legacy Declan and Elise had created, even if it meant tearing our family apart in the process. With the evidence we gathered from Declan's house, Bill assured me we had a solid case against him and Elise. However, as he delved deeper into their financial records, a more sinister truth began to emerge. "Marjorie, I'm afraid the situation is even more dire than we initially thought," Bill said gravely as we met in his office. "It appears Declan has been embezzling funds from the family business for years." I felt the air leave my lungs as the weight of his words sank in. The family business, my late husband's legacy, had been tainted by my own son's greed and deceit. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Bill shook his head solemnly. "Millions, by our estimates. He's been funneling money into offshore accounts, likely to fund his gambling habit and lavish lifestyle with Elise." Anger surged through me, hot and relentless. Not only had Declan neglected his children, but he had also tarnished the very foundation my husband had built with his own hands. "We need to stop him," I said, my jaw clenched. "Freeze his accounts, revoke his access to the business, do whatever it takes to cut him off completely." Bill nodded, already drafting the necessary legal documents. "I'll have our team move swiftly on this, Marjorie. We'll cripple his financial resources before he can make another move." As he outlined the steps we would take, I found myself transported back to a time when Declan was just a boy. innocent, full of promise, and utterly devoted to his father. How had he fallen so far astray? Pushing those thoughts aside, I refocused on the task at hand. Revenge, while not my initial motivation, had become a driving force. Declan had not only betrayed his own children, but had desecrated the very name and legacy he was born into. Over the next few days, Bill and his team worked tirelessly, filing injunctions and freeze orders on Declan's accounts and assets. With each legal maneuver, I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that his ill-gotten empire was crumbling around him. Throughout it all, Lila and Tess remained remarkably resilient. They seemed to draw strength from the knowledge that their suffering would not be in vain, that their father and his wife would face the consequences of their actions. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Tess turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. "Grandma, can we really take everything from them?" she asked, her voice laced with a newfound maturity. I nodded solemnly. "Your father has betrayed this family in the worst way imaginable. He doesn't deserve a single penny of what he's stolen, not after what he put you girls through." Lila reached over and squeezed her sister's hand, a silent show of solidarity. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride in their resilience and determination. "Good," Tess said, her voice steely. "They deserve to lose it all." As the legal proceedings gained momentum, I found myself feeling a sense of vindication, not just for myself, but for my late husband's legacy. Declan had tarnished everything we held dear, and now he would face the consequences of his actions. With each small victory in the courtroom, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The toxic legacy Declan had created was unraveling, and in its place, a new foundation was being laid. One built on integrity, justice, and the unwavering bond between a grandmother and her beloved grandchildren. With the legal wheels in motion, our next step was to gather irrefutable proof of Declan and Elise's neglect and wrongdoing. Bill had hired a private investigator, a seasoned professional named Frank, to delve deeper into their sordid affairs. "We need testimonies, documented evidence, anything that can solidify our case," Bill explained as we met with Frank in his dingy office. "No stone unturned." Frank nodded, his weathered face betraying a lifetime of experience in uncovering the darkest of secrets. "Don't worry, we'll leave no trail uncovered. These two won't know what hit 'em." Over the next few weeks, Frank's team worked tirelessly, interviewing neighbors, gathering financial records, and even staking out the seedy establishments Declan frequented during his binges. With each new piece of evidence, the full scope of his depravity came into sharper focus. One afternoon, Frank arrived at my doorstep, a grim look on his face. "We got 'em," he said, handing me a thick manila envelope. "Everything you need to bury those scumbags for good." Inside were damning photographs, witness statements, and a detailed timeline of Declan and Elise's neglectful behavior. There were accounts of the children being left alone for days on end, forced to fend for themselves while their parents indulged in their vices. Neighbors had even called the authorities on multiple occasions, only to have Declan charm his way out of trouble with his silver tongue. As I pored over the evidence, a sickening feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. How could my own flesh and blood have fallen so far? The man I had raised, the loving son who idolized his father, was now little more than a hollow shell consumed by greed and selfishness. But amidst the heartbreak, a steely resolve took root within me. Declan and Elise would face the full weight of their misdeeds, not just for the sake of Lila and Tess, but for every child who had ever suffered at the hands of neglectful parents. With the evidence in hand, Bill wasted no time in filing a comprehensive lawsuit, seeking not only full custody of the girls, but also financial restitution for the embezzled funds and damages. It was a bold move, one that would undoubtedly rattle the foundations of Declan's crumbling empire. As the news of the impending legal battle spread, whispers began to circulate within our social circles. Some expressed shock and disbelief, while others nodded knowingly, as if they had seen this coming all along. But I paid them no mind. My focus was solely on securing justice for my grandchildren. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Lila turned to me, her eyes brimming with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Grandma, do you really think we can win?" she asked, her voice small and fragile. I reached over and took her hand in mine. giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Sweetheart, with the evidence we have, there's no way they can wriggle out of this. Your father and Elise are going to face the consequences of their actions. I promise you that." Tess, ever the stoic one, nodded in agreement. "Good, they deserve everything that's coming to them." As the girls retreated to their rooms for the night, I found myself alone with my thoughts. The road ahead would be long and arduous, filled with painful revelations and bitter confrontations. But through it all, one thought kept me grounded. By dismantling the toxic legacy Declan had created, I was paving the way for a brighter future. One where my grandchildren could find healing, redemption, and the love they so desperately deserved. With the lawsuits filed and evidence mounted, the dominoes began to fall swiftly. Bill's team worked relentlessly, leveraging our legal maneuvers to freeze Declan's remaining assets and restrict his access to the family business. Overnight, the empire he had built through deceit and embezzlement crumbled around him. Bank accounts were frozen, properties seized, and his once lavish lifestyle ground to a halt. It was a harsh dose of karma, but one that he had brought upon himself through his own greed and neglect. As the news spread, the reactions from our social circles were varied. Some expressed shock and disbelief, while others nodded knowingly, as if they had seen this implosion coming all along. But for me, the most satisfying response came from an unlikely source: Eve, Declan's ex-wife and Lila's mother. "Marjorie, I can't thank you enough for doing what I couldn't," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given Lila a chance at a normal life, away from that toxic environment." I assured her that protecting the girls was my top priority, and that Declan would face the full weight of his transgressions. With each legal victory, I felt a sense of vindication, not just for myself, but for every child who had ever suffered at the hands of neglectful parents. As the legal proceedings gained momentum, the courts awarded me temporary custody of Lila and Tess. It was a bittersweet moment, as I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but having them safely under my roof was a relief beyond measure. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Tess turned to me, her eyes brimming with a mixture of gratitude and residual pain. "Grandma, I know this has been hard on you," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "But thank you for not giving up on us." I reached over and squeezed her hand, offering her a reassuring smile. "Sweetheart, you and Lila are my world. I would move mountains to keep you both safe and loved." Lila nodded in agreement, leaning her head against my shoulder. In that moment I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose, a determination to create a safe haven for these two remarkable girls, a sanctuary where they could heal and flourish away from the toxicity of their parents' choices. As the legal proceedings intensified, the whispers and rumors swirled around us like a storm. Some voiced their support, while others questioned the validity of our actions. But through it all, I remained steadfast in my resolve, bolstered by the knowledge that I was doing the right thing for my grandchildren. Then, one fateful day, the hammer fell. Declan and Elise were arrested, facing a litany of charges ranging from child neglect and endangerment to fraud and embezzlement. As they were led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction, the architects of their own downfall, finally facing the consequences of their actions. That night, as I tucked Lila and Tess into bed, I couldn't help but marvel at their resilience. These two remarkable girls had endured unspeakable trauma, and yet they remained strong, their spirits unbroken. "It's over, isn't it?" Lila whispered, her eyes heavy with fatigue, but also a newfound sense of peace. I nodded, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. It's finally over." As I left their room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph, not just for myself, but for the legacy my late husband had built. Through perseverance and unwavering determination, I had dismantled the toxic empire Declan had created, and in its place, a new foundation was being laid, one built on love, integrity, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The aftermath of Declan and Elise's arrests should have brought a sense of relief, but instead, a tense calm settled over our household. It was as if we were all holding our breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. That moment came sooner than expected. One morning, a few days after their incarceration, I heard a commotion at the front door. I opened it to find Declan and Elise, both disheveled and visibly agitated, glaring at me with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Where are my kids, Mother?" Declan spat, his words slurred and his eyes bloodshot. "You had no right to take them," Elise chimed in, her voice shrill and accusatory. "This is kidnapping, Marjorie. You're going to regret this." I stood my ground, unflinching in the face of their vitriol. "I had every right, Declan. You and your wife abandoned those girls, left them to fend for themselves while you indulged in your vices." Declan laughed bitterly, a hollow sound that sent chills down my spine. "So you think stripping us of our assets and throwing us in jail is going to make you Mother of the Year? You're delusional." Before I could respond, Lila and Tess appeared in the hallway, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anger. Lila immediately shrank back, but Tess stepped forward, her jaw clenched. "You two don't get to play the victim here," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You're the ones who neglected us, who left us alone for days on end, with no food or care." Elise scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Don't act like you're some innocent victim, Tess. You were always a problem child, just like your deadbeat father." The words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, and for a moment I feared Tess might lash out physically. But then her shoulders slumped, and she shook her head slowly. "You know what? You're not even worth it," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. "You're just a sad, pathetic excuse for a mother." Declan's face contorted with rage, and he took a step forward, his fists clenched. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough!" I shouted, positioning myself between him and the girls. "You've done enough damage, Declan. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." He opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of approaching sirens cut him off. Moments later, 2 police officers appeared on the doorstep, their expressions grim. "Declan Thompson and Elise Franklin, you're in violation of your parole conditions," one of the officers stated. "You're both under arrest." As they were led away in handcuffs, Elise turned to me, her eyes blazing with hatred. "This isn't over, Marjorie. You'll regret this." But her words rang hollow, a feeble attempt to salvage what little power she had left. In that moment, I knew that the toxic legacy they had created was well and truly dismantled, reduced to nothing more than empty threats and broken promises. Later that night, as Lila and Tess prepared for bed, an uneasy silence hung in the air. I could see the weight of the day's events weighing heavily on them, and my heart ached for the trauma they had endured. "Girls," I began, my voice gentle but firm, "I know today was difficult, but I want you to know that you're safe here. Your father and Elise can't hurt you anymore." Lila nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know, Grandma. It's just seeing them again, hearing the things they said." Tess reached over and squeezed her sister's hand, offering her a reassuring smile. "We've got each other, Lila, and Grandma. That's all that matters now." In that moment, I felt an overwhelming surge of pride and love for these 2 remarkable young women. They had endured unspeakable hardship, and yet they remained resilient, their bonds forged in the crucible of adversity. As they drifted off to sleep, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. The road had been long and arduous, paved with painful revelations and bitter confrontations. But through it all, one constant had remained: the unwavering love and determination of a grandmother willing to fight for her grandchildren, no matter the cost. And as I gazed upon their peaceful faces, I knew that every sacrifice, every battle fought, had been worth it. The toxic legacy that had once threatened to consume us was no more, replaced by a newfound sense of hope and the promise of a brighter future, one built on the unbreakable bonds of family. The days following Declan and Elise's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. As the details of their misdeeds were laid bare in court, the true depths of their depravity became painfully clear. Witness after witness took the stand, recounting harrowing tales of neglect and abuse. Neighbors spoke of the children being left alone for days on end, forced to fend for themselves, while their parents indulged in their vices. Financial experts detailed the intricate web of fraud and embezzlement that Declan had woven, siphoning millions from the family business to fund his gambling addiction and lavish lifestyle. Through it all, Lila and Tess remained remarkably composed, their strength and resilience a testament to the unbreakable bond they shared. Occasionally, I would catch them exchanging a silent glance, a wordless acknowledgement of the nightmare they had endured and ultimately survived. As the trial progressed, the verdicts came down like a hammer. Declan was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and child endangerment, facing a lengthy prison sentence and the complete dissolution of his ill-gotten assets. Elise, his partner in crime, was convicted of child neglect and accessory charges, her once lavish lifestyle reduced to a bitter memory. The sentencing was a somber affair, attended by a small gathering of family and supporters. As Declan was led away in chains, he turned to me, his eyes burning with a mixture of resentment and resignation. "I hope you're happy, Mother," he spat, his words dripping with venom. "You've torn this family apart." I held his gaze, unflinching in the face of his vitriol. "No, Declan, you did that the moment you chose greed and selfishness over your own children." Elise remained silent, her once haughty demeanor replaced by a hollow, haunted expression. As she was escorted from the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity, a reminder that even the most vile of souls were once innocent, corrupted by the toxic legacy of their own making. In the aftermath of the trial, a sense of relief washed over our household. The dark cloud that had loomed over us for so long had finally dissipated, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. One evening, as we gathered for dinner, Lila looked up from her plate, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of hope. "Grandma, do you think we can finally move on from all this?" she asked, her voice tinged with a rare vulnerability. I reached across the table and took her hand in mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Of course, sweetheart. The road ahead won't be easy, but we'll walk it together, as a family." Tess nodded in agreement, her expression one of quiet determination. We made it through the worst of it. Nothing can break us now. As the weeks passed, a new sense of normalcy began to take root in our lives. The girls thrived in their studies, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they were finally safe, loved, and free from the toxic legacy of their parents' choices. I, too, found solace in the simple joys of our newfound family dynamic. Watching Lila and Tess blossom into confident, resilient young women filled me with a sense of pride and purpose that had been lacking for far too long. On a sunny afternoon as we sat together in the backyard, Lila turned to me, her eyes bright with a mixture of gratitude and love. "Grandma, I don't know where we'd be without you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave us a second chance, a chance to be a real family." Tess nodded, reaching over to take my hand. "You're the one who showed us what it means to truly love and support each other, no matter what." In that moment, as I looked upon the faces of these two remarkable young women, I knew that every sacrifice, every battle fought, had been worth it. The toxic legacy that had once threatened to consume us was no more, replaced by the unbreakable bonds of family and the promise of a future where love, resilience, and justice would always prevail. As the warm sunlight enveloped us, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace, a quiet certainty that the darkest chapters of our lives had been closed and a new, brighter story was just beginning to unfold. The words Eric spat out stung like venom, each syllable dripping with disdain. "I've had enough. She's just a lazy burden. You failed as a mother, raising her to be this useless." My heart sank as I watched Abby's fragile form tremble, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. How could any decent human treat a pregnant woman, their own wife, with such cruelty? "She's your wife, Eric," I cried out, barely containing my rage. "Pregnant with your child? What kind of man are you?" Abby flinched at my raised voice, her hands instinctively cradling her swollen belly. I wanted nothing more than to shield her from this monster I once trusted with my daughter's well-being. Eric sneered, his features twisted into an ugly mask of contempt. Some man I turned out to be, stuck with this pathetic excuse for a wife. I should have known better than to marry someone so weak and useless. Each venomous word felt like a physical blow, and I struggled to maintain my composure. How had things spiraled so catastrophically? Where had I gone wrong in raising Abby to end up with such a vile creature? As a single mother, I had poured every ounce of my being into providing Abby with a loving, supportive home after her father's untimely death. We had been a team, navigating life's challenges together, and I had reveled in watching her blossom into a kind, intelligent young woman. Yet, somewhere along the way, I had failed to instill in her the strength to recognize and reject such blatant emotional abuse. The signs had been there, subtle at first, but I had been too blinded by my desire for Abby's happiness to see the truth. Now, as I watched her shrink under Eric's withering gaze, I knew I had to take action. No child of mine would ever suffer such cruelty, not while I still drew breath. "Get out of my house, Eric," I hissed, mustering every ounce of courage I possessed. "And if you ever come near my daughter or grandchild again, I swear to God, you'll regret the day you were born." As the door slammed shut behind Eric's retreating form, I felt the weight of years past bear down upon me. Raising Abby alone after her father's passing had been the greatest challenge of my life, but also my proudest achievement. Those early years were a blur of sleepless nights, juggling work and motherhood with an almost manic determination. Yet, through it all, Abby had been my constant source of joy and motivation. Her bright smile and infectious laughter had been the balm that soothed my weariest days. I reminisced about the times we'd spend evenings cuddled on the couch, reading her favorite storybooks or watching her beloved Disney movies. Even as she grew older, our bond only strengthened, and I relished every moment we shared. Abby had been a shy, introverted child, often preferring the company of her books to that of her peers. I had worried at times that her quietness might impede her ability to form meaningful connections later in life. But as she blossomed into a beautiful young woman, I saw her confidence grow, her warmth and kindness drawing friends and admirers alike. It was through one such friend that Abby met Eric, the man who would ultimately become her undoing. At first he had seemed charming, attentive, and supportive, everything a mother could hope for in her daughter's partner. I had been foolishly blind to the warning signs, so desperate was I for Abby to find happiness. "He's such a nice young man, Mom," Abby had gushed, her eyes alight with infatuation. "He really listens to me and makes me feel understood in a way I've never experienced before." Foolishly, I had believed her, allowing myself to be swayed by Eric's polished facade and empty platitudes. How I wished I could go back and shake some sense into my naive younger self. The first crack in Eric's mask appeared mere months into their marriage. Abby confided in me about his occasional bouts of anger, his cutting remarks that left her feeling small and inadequate. I had brushed it off as newlywed growing pains, assuring her that all couples experienced rough patches. But the emotional abuse only escalated, until Abby found herself trapped in a cycle of gaslighting and manipulation, her once vibrant spirit dimming with each passing day. By the time she discovered her pregnancy, she was but a shell of her former self, terrified and desperate for an escape. Yet, even as I cradled her trembling form in my arms, soothing her frantic sobs, I could never have anticipated the depths of Eric's depravity. The man who had once sworn to cherish and protect my daughter had become her own personal demon, tormenting her with cruel words and indifference. As I tended to Abby's needs, my rage toward Eric festered, a slow-burning ember that threatened to erupt into an all-consuming inferno. He would pay for what he had done, of that I was certain. No one harmed my family and walked away unscathed. Abby's haunted gaze bore into me, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of torment condensed into a single, heart-wrenching moment. Each trembling word that spilled from her lips felt like a dagger piercing my soul. "He wouldn't let me rest, Mom. No matter how sick I felt or how much my body ached, Eric demanded that I keep up with all the household chores." She paused, drawing a shuddering breath. "He said it was my duty as his wife, that I was just being lazy and selfish." Rage surged through my veins, an all-consuming fire that threatened to engulf me. How dare that vile excuse for a human treat my daughter, his own pregnant wife, with such callous disregard? "Did he not see how much you were suffering?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I fought to maintain my composure. Abby shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He didn't care, Mom. All he cared about was his own convenience, his own needs. I was just a burden to him, an inconvenience to be endured." The mental image of my strong, vibrant daughter, reduced to a mere servant in her own home, denied even the basic compassion owed to an expectant mother, twisted like a knife in my gut. Eric's cruelty knew no bounds. I tried to reason with him, to make him understand how difficult this pregnancy was for me, Abby continued, her voice wavering. But he just brushed me off, telling me I was being dramatic and oversensitive. I pulled her into a fierce embrace, cradling her against me as the sobs racked her frail form. "Shh, baby, it's okay. You're safe now. That monster can't hurt you anymore." But even as I uttered those words, I knew they rang hollow. Eric's poison had seeped too deep, leaving invisible scars that would take far longer to heal than any physical wound. "He left me here, Mom," Abby whispered, her voice thick with anguish. "He said he was done with me, that I was no longer his problem. He just abandoned me, like I was nothing." White-hot fury coursed through me, threatening to choke out all rational thought. How could any man, any human being, treat the mother of his unborn child with such utter disdain? In that moment, a profound shift occurred within me. A maternal instinct ignited with the force of a supernova. Eric had awoken a primal, protective rage that would not be sated until he paid for his sins in full. "Listen to me, Abby," I said, grasping her shoulders and forcing her to meet my gaze. "That bastard will never lay a finger on you or my grandchild again. I swear on my life I will not rest until he gets what's coming to him." Abby's eyes widened, a flicker of hope kindling amidst the despair. "But how, Mom? He's so powerful, so influential. He'll just bury us with his wealth and connections." A grim smile tugged at my lips as I brushed away the tears streaking her cheeks. "Leave that to me, sweetheart. I may be just a single mother, but I'm also a force to be reckoned with when it comes to protecting my family." With steely resolve, I vowed to myself that Eric Sterling would soon learn the true depth of a mother's wrath. His reign of terror was over, and the wheels of karma were already in motion. In the days that followed, my sole focus became helping Abby heal from the emotional trauma inflicted by that monster she once called her husband. I enlisted the aid of our neighbors, Megan and Paul Collins, who had become like family over the years. Megan, a warm-hearted soul with an unwavering moral compass, took Abby under her wing, providing a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. Her empathy and kindness were like a soothing balm, slowly mending the gaping wounds in Abby's psyche. Paul, a respected psychologist, offered his professional expertise, guiding Abby through weekly therapy sessions designed to help her process the abuse and rebuild her shattered self-esteem. His gentle yet firm approach gradually coaxed her out of the shell she had retreated into, allowing her true strength to resurface. With their support, I witnessed a remarkable transformation in my daughter. The haunted look in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a glimmer of determination that grew brighter with each passing day. Slowly but surely, the vibrant, spirited young woman I had raised emerged from the ashes of Eric's cruelty. As Abby's due date approached, I made the difficult decision to take a temporary leave from my job, putting my career on hold to focus entirely on her well-being. Money would be tight, but no sacrifice was too great when it came to ensuring the safety and happiness of my family. Megan and Paul rallied around us, offering not only emotional support, but also practical assistance. Megan helped with household chores and meal preparations, while Paul kept a watchful eye on Abby's mental state, adjusting her therapy as needed. Through it all, the mere thought of Eric's name ignited a simmering rage within me. The knowledge that he remained free, untouched by the consequences of his actions, was a festering wound that refused to heal. But I bided my time, channeling my anger into providing Abby with the love and care she so desperately needed. Vengeance could wait. My daughter's recovery took precedence over all else. The day Abby went into labor, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. As I held her hand and coached her through each contraction, I marveled at her resilience, her determination to bring new life into the world despite the darkness she had endured. When our beautiful granddaughter, Grace, finally arrived, it was as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. Cradling her tiny, perfect form, I felt a surge of hope and purpose flood through me. This innocent child would never know the pain and fear that her mother had experienced. I would ensure it, no matter the cost. In that sacred moment, with Abby beaming down at her newborn daughter, a silent vow echoed through my soul. Eric Sterling would pay dearly for the suffering he had inflicted upon us. The wheels of karma were already in motion, and his reckoning would be both swift and merciless. For now, though, I allowed myself to bask in the warmth of new life, cherishing the bond between mother and child that Eric had so callously disregarded. His day of reckoning would come, but for the moment, all that mattered was the love and joy radiating from Abby's exhausted yet radiant smile. The first time Eric stepped foot in the hospital room, a mere 3 days after Grace's birth, the air seemed to crackle with tension. Abby visibly shrank back into the pillows, clutching our precious bundle protectively to her chest. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, positioning myself between him and the bed in a protective stance. Eric sneered, his cold eyes sweeping over Abby with disdain. "I'm here to see my child, of course. Or did you think you could keep her from me?" "Your child?" I scoffed, barely containing my rage. "You forfeited any right to call her that the moment you abandoned her mother in her hour of need." His jaw tightened, but he made no move to approach, clearly sensing the unwavering resolution in my stance. Instead, he turned his gaze toward Abby, his voice dripping with condescension. "Well, aren't you going to introduce me to my daughter, or are you too useless to even manage that?" Abby flinched as if struck, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. In that moment, I saw the fear and trauma etched into every line of her face, the scars left by Eric's emotional abuse running deeper than any physical wound. Before I could respond, Megan's voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. "That's enough, Eric. Your appalling behavior has gone too far." Spinning around, I found Megan standing in the doorway, her usually warm features set in a mask of steely determination. Paul hovered behind her, his expression equally resolute. "Abby has no obligation to subject herself or her child to your toxic presence," Megan continued, her words laced with venom. "Not after the way you've treated her." Eric's lip curled in a sneer as he turned to face our allies. "This is none of your concern. It's a family matter, and I'll thank you to stay out of it." Paul stepped forward, his normally gentle demeanor replaced by a cold, authoritative presence that brooked no argument. "On the contrary, Eric, it very much is my concern. As your superior at the firm, I can't ignore the clear evidence of your abusive behavior toward your wife and child." A flicker of unease crossed Eric's face, but he quickly masked it with a veneer of arrogance. "You have no proof, just the hysterical ramblings of a hormonal woman." "Don't I?" Megan countered, producing a thick manila folder from her bag. "I've been documenting your actions for months, Eric. Every cruel word, every demeaning insult, every instance of emotional and psychological abuse, it's all here, laid out in excruciating detail." Eric's confident facade crumbled as he stared at the damning evidence in Megan's hands. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, a realization that his carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling. "You'll never make those accusations stick," he blustered, but the waver in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Paul fixed him with an unwavering stare. "I wouldn't be so sure about that. With the evidence we have, coupled with Abby's testimony, you'll be lucky to avoid criminal charges, let alone keep your job." A heavy silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the soft coos of the newborn Grace, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding around her. In that moment, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude for the people who had rallied to our defense. As Eric slouched out of the room, his arrogance finally punctured, I knew that the wheels of karma had been set in irreversible motion. His reign of terror was nearing its end, and he would soon face the consequences of his actions. Turning back to Abby, I saw a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes, a spark of determination that had been dormant for far too long. With the support of our loved ones, we would weather this storm and emerge victorious, our family bond stronger than ever before. 3 months after Grace's birth, the fragile peace we had cultivated was shattered by Eric's unexpected arrival. One moment, Abby and I were cooing over Grace's latest milestone, and the next, his thunderous pounding echoed through the house. "Open up, Abby!" he bellowed, his voice laced with fury. "You can't keep me from my daughter forever!" Abby tensed, her arms tightening protectively around Grace's tiny form. The fear in her eyes cut me to the core, a stark reminder of the emotional trauma she had endured. "Stay here," I whispered, pressing a reassuring kiss to her forehead before rising to confront the source of our torment. Eric's face was twisted into an ugly sneer as I swung open the door, his eyes blazing with a dangerous cocktail of rage and entitlement. "What do you want, Eric?" I demanded, positioning myself squarely in the doorway to block his path. "I'm here for my wife and child," he spat, attempting to push past me. "This little game of yours has gone on long enough." I stood my ground, unflinching in the face of his aggression. Abby is no longer your wife, and you have no claim over that innocent child. Not after the way you've treated them." His nostrils flared, and for a moment I braced myself for an explosive outburst. But then a sly grin spread across his features, sending a chill down my spine. "You think you can keep me away with some pathetic little restraining order?" he sneered. "I have resources you can't even begin to imagine. One word from me, and your precious Abby's life will become a living hell." Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I wouldn't be so sure about that, Eric." Paul stepped into view, his expression a mask of cold fury. Beside him stood Megan, her steely gaze fixed on Eric with an intensity that could have melted steel. "What's this?" Eric scoffed, his bravado faltering slightly. "You brought your little posse for backup?" "They're here to ensure you face the consequences of your actions," Paul stated, his voice laced with barely contained contempt. "Actions that have not gone unnoticed at the firm." Eric paled, the realization of his precarious position dawning on his features. "You can't touch me. I'm too valuable to the company." "On the contrary," Paul countered, producing a thick manila folder from his briefcase. "Your behavior has been meticulously documented, Eric. Verbal abuse, intimidation, unethical business practices. The list goes on and on." With each accusation, Eric's composure crumbled further, his mask of arrogance slipping to reveal the desperation lurking beneath. "You can't prove any of that," he blustered, but the waver in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Megan stepped forward, her expression one of grim satisfaction. "We have more than enough evidence to not only terminate your employment but also pursue legal action for the emotional and psychological trauma you've inflicted on Abby." Eric's eyes darted between us, panic setting in as he realized the depth of the hole he had dug for himself. "This isn't over," he snarled, his face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this, all of you." But even as he hurled his empty threats, I could see the defeat etched into every line of his face. The once powerful man who had held us all in his thrall was reduced to a pathetic shell, his carefully constructed facade crumbling to dust. As Eric retreated, his parting words ringing hollow in his wake, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. The nightmare was finally drawing to a close, and justice would soon be served. Turning back to Abby, I found her gazing at me with a mixture of awe and gratitude, her arms cradling our precious Grace with a renewed sense of confidence. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front forged in the fires of adversity. Eric's reign of terror was over, and our family's future burned brighter than ever before. In the days following Eric's confrontation, a palpable shift occurred, as if the universe itself was righting the wrongs he had committed. Paul's intervention at the firm proved to be the catalyst that unleashed a torrent of long-buried allegations against Eric. One by one, former colleagues' subordinates came forward, emboldened by the knowledge that their voices would finally be heard. Tales of verbal abuse, intimidation tactics, and unethical business practices soon flooded the company's inboxes, painting a damning portrait of Eric's true character. Within a week, the once untouchable executive found himself unceremoniously dismissed, his illustrious career reduced to ashes by the weight of his own misdeeds. The news spread like wildfire, and Eric's reputation went up in flames, his carefully cultivated image of success crumbling under the intense scrutiny. As the professional fallout escalated, Megan and Paul worked tirelessly to build an airtight legal case against Eric. Abby's testimony, coupled with the mountain of evidence they had accumulated, left little room for doubt or equivocation. When the divorce proceedings finally commenced, it was a mere formality. Eric's lawyers, sensing the futility of their position, advised him to accept the terms and avoid further public humiliation. In the end, Abby emerged victorious, awarded sole custody of Grace and a sizable settlement that would ensure their financial security for years to come. A restraining order was swiftly issued, severing Eric's ability to inflict any further harm upon our family. As the gavel fell sealing Eric's fate, I watched him closely, searching for any flicker of remorse or contrition. But his expression remained a mask of defiance, his eyes burning with barely restrained fury. It wasn't until the courtroom had emptied, leaving only Eric and his legal team behind, that the facade finally cracked. Megan, ever the vigilant observer, witnessed the moment when Eric's bravado shattered, his shoulders slumping in defeat as the full weight of his transgressions bore down upon him. "He broke down, Sarah," she recounted later, her voice tinged with a hint of pity. "All the bluster and arrogance drained away, and he just crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But any hint of sympathy I might have harbored was quickly extinguished by the memory of Abby's haunted eyes, the trauma she had endured at Eric's hands. He had brought this reckoning upon himself through his own despicable actions, and he would receive no quarter from me. As the dust settled and the legal battles faded into memory, Eric's life spiraled into a tailspin of public disgrace and financial ruin. His once formidable wealth evaporated, consumed by legal fees and the settlement he was forced to pay Abby. Word of his misdeeds spread like wildfire, rendering him virtually unhireable in his chosen profession. Gone were the days of wealth and influence, replaced by a cruel reality of his own making. Through it all, Abby blossomed, her confidence and self-assurance growing with each passing day. The weight of Eric's oppression had been lifted, and she was finally free to embrace her true potential, unencumbered by the shackles of his abuse. As I watched her thrive, reveling in the joys of motherhood and rediscovering her passions, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction settle over me. The wheels of karma had turned, and Eric Sterling had reaped the bitter harvest he had sown through his cruelty. Justice had been served, but more importantly, our family had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. The nightmare was over, and a new chapter of healing and growth awaited us, untainted by the specter of Eric's malice. With Eric's toxic influence finally excised from our lives, a profound sense of peace and renewal washed over us. It was as if a dark cloud had lifted, allowing the warmth of hope and possibility to shine through once more. Abby, buoyed by her legal victory and the unwavering support of our loved ones, blossomed before my very eyes. The haunted, fragile woman who had sought refuge on my doorstep all those months ago was replaced by a radiant, self-assured mother, her eyes sparkling with a newfound strength and determination. Grace, our precious little ray of sunshine, thrived in the loving, nurturing environment we had created for her. Each milestone, every giggle and babbled word was a poignant reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of a mother's love to overcome even the darkest of circumstances. Megan and Paul remained steadfast pillars of support, their friendship and guidance invaluable as we navigated this new chapter of our lives. Megan, ever the voice of reason, offered sage advice on everything from childcare to personal growth, while Paul continued to provide Abby with the therapeutic tools she needed to heal from the emotional scars of her ordeal. As for me, I found solace in the knowledge that my unwavering devotion to my family had been vindicated. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, and the battles fought had all been worth it to ensure the safety and well-being of my loved ones. With Eric's influence effectively neutralized, we were free to rebuild our lives on our own terms, unencumbered by the weight of his toxic presence. Abby, emboldened by her newfound independence, began exploring career opportunities, determined to provide a stable and secure future for Grace. I, too, found myself reevaluating my priorities, realizing that my dedication to my job had often come at the expense of cherished moments with my family. Retirement, once a distant dream, suddenly seemed within reach, and I began to contemplate the prospect of devoting my golden years to the pure, unadulterated joy of being a doting grandmother. Through it all, the shadow of Eric's cruelty loomed, a constant reminder of the darkness we had overcome. Yet, rather than allowing it to consume us, we channeled that experience into a renewed appreciation for the bond that held our family together. Abby, in particular, seemed to draw strength from the knowledge that she had not only survived, but emerged victorious from her ordeal. The once meek, timid girl who had been so easily cowed by Eric's intimidation tactics had blossomed into a fierce, resilient woman, her spirit tempered by the fires of adversity. "I won't let him define me anymore, Mom," she declared one evening as we sat together, basking in the warmth of Grace's infectious giggles. "He tried to break me, but in the end he only made me stronger." In that moment I felt an immense surge of pride, not just for Abby's perseverance, but for the unwavering love and support that had carried us through the darkest of times. Our family had been tested, stretched to the limits of endurance, but we had emerged on the other side, battered yet unbroken. As the summer sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, I found myself filled with a profound sense of gratitude. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was abundantly clear. No matter what challenges lay before us, we would face them together, a united front forged in the crucible of adversity. Eric Sterling's reign of terror was but a distant memory, and the future burned bright with the promise of new beginnings and endless possibilities.